Together, we will make America great again.
RPN is not responsible for the views, actions, statements, or opinions of its guests, advertisers, or even its viewers. The information contained in this program is not to be confused with medical or legal advice. An appearance on this platform is not necessarily an endorsement, but as always, we encourage you to do your own research. Enjoy the show. Recently, the U.S. Department of Energy announced $2.7 billion in contracts to restore domestic uranium enrichment capabilities. This isn't just government spending, it's a declaration of intent because America needs uranium, domestic uranium, and it needs it now. So here's the reality. The U.S. consumes over 50 million pounds of uranium every single year, but we produce less than 1 million pounds domestically. Obviously, that leaves America 98% dependent on foreign suppliers for our supply. It's a critical vulnerability for national security, power generation, and advanced weapons systems. With Russia controlling much of the global enrichment capacity and escalating tensions in Iran threatening nuclear supply, the stakes could not be higher, which is why the White House has made it crystal clear. America must develop its own supply chain. And this is where Kirkstone Metals comes in. They trade under KSM in Canada and KSMCF in the US. They've got decades of uranium and junior mining expertise, and Kirkstone's leadership team knows how to turn exploration projects into real value. But the question is, can they do it again? Kirkstone controls two 100% owned uranium projects strategically located in the Athabasca Basin. This is the richest uranium district on the planet. Same area, same world-class neighborhood, and at their flagship Key Lake project, drilling has already hit high-grade uranium right near the surface, but the team truly believes the real prize lies deep underground. So using a playbook based on the decade's biggest discoveries, they're hunting the massive source below. So let's talk about the Athabasca Basin. It's home to multi-billion-dollar names like NextGen Energy and Denison Mines, but the real upside, it's often the junior explorers that are operating right next door. The Athabasca Basin has delivered over 20% of the world's uranium discoveries, with an estimated $200 to $300 billion worth of uranium identified in the ground, and yet Kirkstone is still sitting at a market cap below $12 million. That's an enormous disconnect between what's found in this district and how some companies are valued today. On January 14th, the U.S. administration reinforced their commitment to domestic energy security, invoking Section 232 via an executive order. It's a formal declaration of resource independence, and it goes beyond support. It's a mandate. Energy security is now national security. and the U.S. government is deploying its full fiscal and regulatory tools to secure the nuclear fuel cycle in North America. Kirkstone Metals, trading as KSMCF in the U.S. and KSM in Canada, is strategically positioned to capitalize on this shift. Now, uranium prices have surged, and some analysts project prices could exceed $100 per pound by 2026 as demand outpaces supply. Federal momentum has already begun to translate into dollars on the ground, including billions in planned funding for domestic uranium enrichment capacity. The sector is entering one of its most active drilling seasons in years, and with its flagship drill program approved, Kirkstone has exploration underway, and they're advancing with a focus on execution. Some companies operating in the district are valued at over $10 billion, and with the U.S. pushing for domestic uranium, Kirkstone could potentially become a leading beneficiary of the reshoring mandate. So if you want to learn more about this critical mineral story and about a team that has delivered big results in the past, check out the link in the description. And a very special thanks to Kirkstone Metals for making today's video possible. Are you still saying over here on YouTube, can you hear me now? Testing, 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 testing. Everybody else could hear me, but only YouTube could not hear me. Well, let's wait a minute to see that this is picking back up because I am definitely speaking and I see people continuing to say sound, but my audio is definitely on. Testing, testing, testing. Okay, now I got a thumbs up. Okay, great. Okay. All right, so as I was saying, Los Angeles and their city council have done something inexplicable. Nithya Raman, one of the candidates for the mayoral race, sits on the city council. The city council has voted to make it illegal for police to pull people over in the city of Los Angeles for things that you would normally expect you'd be pulled over for. That would include expired tags, non-functioning taillights, a cracked windshield, broken side view mirrors, if you have illegal tint on your windows, if your exhaust is too loud, which might indicate that maybe your muffler or your catalytic converter has been stolen, or maybe it just needs to be changed because they're super old, or if you're not even using a license plate as you drive around town. The reasoning behind these insane description of non-police interaction demand is because it disproportionately affects black and brown people. So go back a couple of days ago when I gave you that thumbnail, which explained how much of the crime was committed by black people in America versus all other races. And, you know, just because people get pulled over or get busted committing crimes does not mean that they are being targeted for committing those crimes. It genuinely might mean that certain groups of people are more likely to actually commit those crimes. And, you know, pretextual traffic stops that police may use these bits of data to pull you over, I mean, they can lead to much, much bigger arrests. I mean, you think about how many times in the past, perhaps somebody had no license plate or expired tags, or maybe they had no tail lights, and a police officer pulls them over. Doesn't matter if they're black, brown, white, or whatever. You pull them over, and then obviously the police officer is going to have an interaction with that person in the course of trying to determine why it is they don't have any tail lights, or maybe why they don't have a license plate, maybe finding out they don't have a driver's license, or maybe finding out that there is a child that's kidnapped in their trunk, or perhaps a woman who's being sexually trafficked, forced to sit in the back, or maybe even there's a dead body that's chopped up in the trunk of the car. Who knows? There's all kinds of great reasons why you would want people to be pulled over for these things. And by telling police they can't pull people over for some very simple traffic violations, they are essentially giving carte blanche to the criminals to continue committing not only these crimes, but many, 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 many other crimes. Now, again, last night was the mayoral debate between Spencer Pratt and Karen Bass and Nithya Raman, and Spencer killed it, you guys. I mean, I knew it was going to be bad for those women, but I don't know that I really thought it was going to be as bad as it was. I mean, it was quite literally a bloodbath. And I'm obviously biased, right? I mean, like, I like Spencer. I like his message. I mean, you know, even if I don't align with him on everything politically, and even if he doesn't consider himself to be the same stripe of political ideology as me, you know, what he's talking about is very, very different from anything that the city of Los Angeles has seen in God knows how long. But last night was straight murder, like ideological murder on these women. A total metaphor here. Obviously, nobody was harmed in the filming of this debate. But I'm not the only person who thought this. I mean, even among Los Angeles residents, they did some polling, and 88% of the viewers believed that Spencer Pratt took these girls to the woodshed. And we're going to watch just a couple of these clips. You know, I mean, it's almost deceptively easy, right? I mean, you look at the state of Los Angeles, and all it took was somebody saying the thing Spencer said for people to say, you know what, this is obviously what we need. I mean, we can't afford more of the same. Otherwise, we're just going to get more of the same. But listen, take a listen. Here he is. Here he is bringing them to that proverbial woodshed.
Well, the good news is when I enforce the law and clear the street of the drug addicts that have taken over 40 blocks of downtown LA, abandoned buildings that have drug addicts just lighting them on fire every other day, I will have potentially 20,000 units available to build. And thankfully, I spent a lot of time in a town that has a lot of builders, and I see all the new 3D printing and the potential of how fast we can do it. And with this ED1 that Mayor Bass was talking about, I met with the developer this week, Carlos, and he said, yes, she did an initiative where she fast-tracked it 6 months. It's been 2.5 years, and he hasn't been able to get his permits. The best part is some of these developers that are taking all of our tax money are charging $750 a square foot for stuff that should be costing $250. And Councilwoman Rahman, this plan that she's going to build all these units, guess what? She's going to sue all the people that actually rents to the tenants, and then they're not going to even want to rent to anybody because she wants people to squat in there for a year and not pay. So I don't know how her plan's going to work.
Councilmember Rahman, you have.
So it was pretty funny because Nithya Raman was trying to posit this conspiracy theory that Karen Bass and Spencer Pratt were working together, that they both wanted to make Nithya Raman look better so that Nithya Raman would be the candidate that one or the other of those two would go up against at the general election in November. And, you know, patently ridiculous to imagine that either of these two people. Spencer was like, listen, I have blamed this woman for burning down my house and the house of my parents and my entire neighborhood. Of course, I'm not working with her. He had so many facts. He knew exactly what was wrong with Los Angeles, and he could quantify it. And, you know, I mean, whether it was how much money they're spending on the homeless people, how many people are victims of violence, How much space is available in downtown Los Angeles that's just being overtaken by drug addicts and homeless people? How many businesses have closed, not for anything but the fact that there is just human excrement covering the sidewalk in front of their businesses? Now, Nithya Raman, because she's been on the city council for like 6 years, she's got a record that Spencer could point to. And one of those specific issues that needs to be addressed is the problem of people doing drugs openly and selling those drugs on the streets of Los Angeles. And Spencer obviously has a plan. These other two women, they don't have a plan. Take a listen.
Say Councilwoman Robin acts like she doesn't have any authority with this homelessness. She was the third most powerful person in city council. She runs the homeless housing thing. She acts like this is just Mayor Bass. First off, inside safe, I like to say inside safe makes all of us outside unsafe. The reality is no matter how many beds you give these people, they are on super meth. They are on fentanyl. The DEA statistic says 93% of this is a drug addiction problem. Councilwoman Robin's plan for treatment first, I will go below the Harbor Freeway tomorrow with her, and we can find some of these people she's going to offer treatment for. She's going to get stabbed in the neck. These people do not want a bed. They want fentanyl or super meth. These ideas cost us over $400 million to house for 70, what did you say? 3,000 people for $400 million? This is an absolute failure for both of them. They're a team.
So,
and another thing that is obviously very suspicious is that Nithya Raman, before deciding to jump into the race, she had already endorsed Karen Bass, like weeks before. And then literally at like the 11th hour, like 2 hours before the filing deadline, Nithya Raman decides that she's going to jump in. She did that clearly because Spencer Pratt was going to beat the tar off of Karen Bass, and they needed somebody that they could throw in there to perhaps dilute the vote just a little bit. Another question, should illegal aliens be allowed to vote in elections? No. Easy answer.
This is a yes or no question and answer. So there's an LA council member. He wants voters to decide. He is saying that non-citizens, should they be allowed to vote in local elections? Is this a yes or no, Mr. Pratt?
No.
Mayor Bass?
It depends. It's not a yes or no.
Depends on what?
Well, first of all, when you say non-citizens, it doesn't mean they're here illegal. It doesn't mean they're undocumented. They could have green cards. They could be here perfectly legal. And there's a lot of states and cities that do that on very, very local elections. We have to see what the councilman is proposing.
Councilmember Bremen.
Yeah, I would say, again, it does depend. In other places, school boards have non-citizens
yes or no?
Non-citizens who vote
Mr. Pratt, I have a question for you. You told NBC News.
Yeah, unfortunately for both Karen Bass and Nithya Raman, to answer no, which is the correct answer, they obviously end up alienating a portion of their base. Now, I see this in the chat, and this is something I've been worried about too. Is it even possible for Spencer Pratt to truly win this election, given how much fraud exists in the state of California? I think that this election that we're seeing right here, the primaries and, of course, the general election, are going to be closely monitored by the federal government. Now, they don't need to come out and say that. I think it's happening. And I think that if there is some egregious example of fraud which takes place, that I think the federal government is going to step in. But that remains to be seen. Now, here's another one. Nithya Raman, I guess, claims that the police department is overfunded. They're actually down like thousands of officers.
In many cases, what is your strategy for getting more people, recruiting more officers and paying for them?
It's more expensive than hiring them is overtime, because that's what these salaries for the fire department that everyone's complaining about, everyone's understaffed. So first off, I'm going to bring hiring back to the LAPD. Right now, the LAPD is hired by the same people that hire sanitation, and we need to bring it back like it was 20 plus years ago so that police hire police, and we need a 10-year plan. It's going to take 10 years to get to the 12,500 officers that we need, and that needs to be a priority. Our sheriff's partner, they're the same size. They have $1 billion more budget for the same size. So this idea that Councilwoman Rahman keeps saying that the police department is overfunded, public safety should be our #1 priority. And we're going to find all this money when we stop her useless open bed plans that actually doesn't put drug addicts in these housing that we're spending billions of dollars. And we're going to actually start checking where this money is going. Not to mention, when you get rid of all the drug addicts off the street, the police won't be responding to the drug addicts all day long.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Now, Nithya Raman was also part of a deal that was made. I believe it was like either the city was involved in the purchase of this building, or they somehow facilitated the purchase of this building by an NGO. The building was worth like $3 million, and it was actually listed at $3 million. But for some inexplicable reason, this NGO ended up paying $8 million for it, well above market value. And of course, the question is, you know, where does that extra money go? I mean, that is the payoff money right there. And Spencer has been very clear that he's going to come in and he's going to immediately shut down all of these nonprofits because, first of all, they're going to be doing audits. Second of all, the money not flowing to them. They're no longer going to be supporting free needles and free crack pipes and free meth pipes and keeping people out on the streets, because all of that NGO money derived from the homeless industrial complex ends up going back into people's campaign accounts, and then obviously to buy cars and property and private planes, et cetera, et cetera. Now, here is another one related to homeless encampments. Apparently, there was the opportunity that the city council had to stop homeless from setting up these encampments in front of daycare centers and schools, basically making sure that people were not going to be smoking meth or smoking fentanyl or shooting heroin, whatever it might be, in front of a school, living there, taking a crap on the street. And of course, Spencer supports that, but these other women obviously don't.
Next question. Do you support the ordinance that restricts encampments in front of schools or daycare centers? Mayor Bass, I'm going to start with you. Yes or no? Ms. Rahman, yes or no?
I support keeping our streets safe. I did vote against the structure of this particular ordinance. And it is because at its best,
it's a yes or no.
It does not, the way this ordinance was structured,
It's
it
no.
does
no.
not
Yes or
keep,
no.
it
We'll
does
take
not
that
keep
as a
our
no.
children safe. It does not
Mr.
keep our
Pratt,
children
sorry.
safe. No,
Mr.
it
Pratt.
doesn't keep our children safe enough.
It's a simple yes or no question. Mr. Pratt.
What I was saying is she's fighting because she doesn't think there's a difference between 1 foot or 500 feet for kids' safety with drug addicts with machetes
Again,
in
we'll
front of
take that.
schools.
Yes or no?
Of course, we do not want encampments in front of schools, parks, daycare.
Okay,
I don't want vehicles.
Mayor, you talked about.
Absolutely incredible, the mental gymnastics that these people have to go through to try to make a case for these policies that everyone can see with their own eyes that this is bad. Now, here is Spencer talking about the closing of businesses, of restaurants. I mean, you think about, it's been a long time since I've been to L.A., but the last time that I was in L.A., it was a thriving center of business and industry. There were people on the streets. Yeah, you had a couple of homeless people, but you didn't have these mass homeless encampments like you have today. I would never go to Los Angeles today. And there's no way, you could not pay me to be a business owner in Los Angeles.
How do we solve this? Are you want to bring workers back into the city full on? I mean, what's the solution for this problem? He mentioned a lot of problems. What's your plan?
Thank you, sir. Well, first off, I was just talking to my friend Rachel, who works in downtown LA. Downtown is so unsafe now that they have to serve the food. All the employees have to eat inside. They can't risk going out. That's why all these beautiful restaurants are closing, because it's so unsafe. So before we require city workers to go back into any buildings, we need to enforce the laws on the street. Councilwoman Rahman is talking about safety, yet when animal rescue activist Rebecca Corey came in and said the dogs are being tortured and abused on the streets of downtown, she walked out of the hearing. She doesn't care about safety. She doesn't care about anything she's talking about. At least Mayor Bass pretends to care.
G. Fontes says, in my opinion, desperation to hurt Trump and Republicans in any way that they can. I'm assuming you're responding to the inexplicable decision made by the LA City Council. LA non-law enforcement can be used to inflate auto and other insurance rates and blame it on Trump and Iran to those who listen. So the problem is that insurance rates are already sky high. You know, when I moved down to Florida, my insurance immediately got much, much more expensive. And what I didn't realize is that while I was here and my insurance got more expensive, quietly back in Michigan, the insurance rates actually got more expensive. I actually did better moving down to Florida. Didn't realize it because I wasn't there paying it anymore. And one of the main drivers of insurance prices going so high over the last couple of years, it's now being admitted, is because of illegal aliens driving their cars without car insurance, getting into accidents. And, you know, if they can, they attempt to fraudulently game the system, get settlements from people, or they just drive off and they leave people like me holding the bag when my insurance policy has to cover the damage on my car. So, you know, that it could be a part of it, G. Fontes, but I think it's more likely that they are just trying to phase out police in any way that they can. It plays right into the exact same type of actions they've taken in many of these Democrat-run hellholes all over the country. Now, here is a fact that I had no idea about. Again, talking about the H-1B issue. Now, many of these industries have caps on how many H-1B employees they can bring in. But did you guys know that universities are completely exempt from the caps on H-1Bs? So that means that essentially they can file and then hire an unlimited number of foreigners at universities all around the country. Undoubtedly, using a lot of money coming in from NGOs, many of the same NGOs that are just simply trying to destroy society in any way that they possibly can. And then at the same time, they receive billions of dollars in tax money, in grants coming from the federal government. Now, if we take a look here, these are the top abusers of the H-1B system every single year. There's 85,000. That's the H-1B cap all told, but universities don't count against it. So we can take a look here, and ironically enough, the University of Michigan appears to be the #1 abuser of the H-1B system. Johns Hopkins University, next, Stanford University, University of Pennsylvania, and these names are going to change as we go through here. But those top 20 schools account for 325,110 H-1B visas. And absolutely insane. You are supposed to have a total of 85,000, but they bring in hundreds of thousands more. And then, of course, the students that come to these universities from other countries, they get those opt visas, and they end up working jobs that Americans would otherwise work as well. Now, perhaps this is something that Spencer will be able to work with the administration on. We've talked about this before, but if you're a child in the LA Unified School District, you are far more likely to be sexually abused by a member of the administration, by a teacher or an employee of the school system. And in an effort to protect teachers and other employees that are part of the union system, it would appear that the Los Angeles Unified School District has been doing whatever they could to protect those people and keep the abuse of children secret. So unfortunately for them, now the federal government is investigating them and the way that they've handled teachers who are accused of sexually abusing these kids. So the U.S. Department of Education announced this week that they've launched a probe into the LAUSD, looking at the rules that govern their efforts to shield these sexual predators. And they are essentially keeping these sexual predators in classrooms, or much like the Catholic Church did throughout the 20th century, if they're caught abusing a child, they just quietly transfer them to another school rather than keeping them at that school. And then, of course, once they go to another school and nobody is told that this person is a danger to their children, that teacher is then free to reoffend until, unfortunately, they get caught again. The Los Angeles Unified School District appears to be protecting sexual predators at the expense of its students. That is the announcement coming from the Department of Education. The department's Office for Civil Rights is looking into the LAUSD policies that, quote, appear to automatically reassign teachers accused of sexual misconduct with students. They also reassign teachers accused of, including engaging in exploitative romantic relationships by sending them to another school. The LAUSD's protection for these accused pervert teachers was cemented in an agreement with the teachers union that appears to guarantee that teachers will be reassigned, not terminated or immediately removed from student-facing roles. The union itself, the teachers union itself, this, I am hoping, is going to utterly destroy the teachers union. But they were able to work this into the teacher's contract. The feds say the district's deal with the union keeps alleged predator teachers on the payroll and working with the 400,000 some odd kids that are part of the LAUSD, even when there is a credible accusation of an infraction. That includes sexual harassment of a student, behavior with a student that is motivated by sexual interest, maintaining a sexual or romantic relationship with a student or some other minor, creating, selling, or using child pornography. You heard that right. If a teacher abuses a student to create child sexual abuse material, that student is left a victim while the teacher is protected, while the teacher is then sent to another school where they are free to continue engaging in that awful behavior that's going to psychologically scar and destroy additional children. Unnecessary physical contact with the student and failure to report suspected child abuse. If you're a teacher and you see that some other teacher on the staff is having an inappropriate sexual relationship with a child, you have a duty. You have a duty of care to speak up and say something to protect that child and to protect the other children that are part of the system that this other employee is involved in. But if you don't do something, doesn't matter. You're just going to get a job someplace else. Under Title IX, schools must respond appropriately. They must address claims of sexual misconduct, including sexual harassment, including sexual assault, and they have to do it in a timely manner. That is the law. And of course, the supremacy clause of the Constitution states that the federal government is the ruling law of the land. But it appears that the LAUSD is putting the continued employment of sexual predators above the safety of the students. Now, a spokesperson for the LAUSD did put out a statement and said that, well, we take all allegations of sexual misconduct and harassment with the utmost seriousness. Now, the district follows the established Title IX procedures and other applicable laws and regulations, she continued, which are designed to ensure a fair, thorough, and impartial process for all parties. Of course, the union did not choose to respond to a request for comment on this story, but the new federal probe is not the first time the LAUSD has come under fire. We've spoken earlier this year about some of those issues. And of course, they are the nation's second largest school district. Recently, they had to put their superintendent, Alberto Carvalho, on ice after the FBI raided his home and office because of a deal that he did with a corrupt artificial intelligence firm. Another LAUSD official was indicted this year over an alleged $22 million kickback scheme with a different Texas tech company, and the federal government currently has an active investigation into the district's 2019 policy that directed teachers and staff to not disclose a student's gender identity as much as possible by shielding the information from parents, effectively transitioning or helping to transition minors without telling those children's parents. The LAUSD's controversial Black Student Achievement Program provides race-based programming for Black students that is not open to students of any other race. They're also facing an investigation for that from the Department of Ed's Office for Civil Rights. And despite all of these troubles, the LAUSD in April struck a last-minute deal to boost teacher pay by nearly 14% under the threat of strikes from the teachers union. And school support workers also scored raises of up to 24% under a separate contract that was settled last month. I don't know. Sometimes I've often said this, you can't hate them enough. I think that actively applies in this instance. These people are selfish. I think that you shouldn't teach unless you want to help children, unless you want to help safeguard and shepherd that next generation into adulthood. Obviously, if you want to propagandize or brainwash or sexually abuse those kids, you have no right being near a child of any type, whether it's your student or not. But this is something that's been sorely needed for a very long time. And I don't think that LA is going to be the last school district that we hear something like this coming from. All right, now we are next going to look into the alleged suicide note of one Jeffrey Epstein. But before we do, I do have a very brief message from our friends over here on Rumble. You guys, parents, grandparents, we got a quick message we got to give you because America is about to hit a major milestone. Yes, we are coming up on the 250th birthday of our incredible country, 250 years of freedom, grit, sacrifice, and the greatest experiment in self-governance the world has ever seen. This is the perfect opportunity for you to help your kids understand why this country matters. There is a free guide called The Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday, and it's honestly a great way to introduce those children to how America began, who the founding fathers were, what they signed when they signed the Declaration of Independence, what they risked in doing so, and why the ideas they fought for 250 years ago are still highly relevant today. This guide is going to send those kids back to that moment when they put pen to paper and knowing at the time that they were risking their lives. And it's going to break it all down in a way that kids will actually not only understand, but also enjoy. It's not going to water it down or turn it into boring schoolwork. So if you care about raising children who know where this country came from, knowing why it's worth preserving, and I'm sure that you all do, this is something that you're going to want to grab. The best part is it's totally free. It's completely free with this offer. You only pay the $2 for shipping and handling, envelope and stamp. That's it. And so you can pick this up by heading to freeusabirthday.com. That is freeusabirthday.com. And the Kid's Guide to America's 250th Birthday is there for your kids today because America's story matters. Let's make sure that the next generation knows it because we know they're not getting it from the LAUSD or more than likely most public school districts around the country. All right, so Jeffrey Epstein, the story goes, was found dead in his prison cell on August 10th, 2019. I like to ask this question. Where were you when you learned that Jeffrey Epstein was no longer alive? Lisa, me, the kids, we were on our way to Cedar Point. It was early in the morning. We were in traffic on the highway in Ohio, and I'm listening to the radio and because I wanted to see if there was any traffic updates because, it was a little bit slow. And across the radio comes the terrifying news that Jeffrey Epstein found dead of suicide in his prison cell. And I think I looked at Lisa and I said, no, because I was waiting for something like that to happen. I knew it was highly, highly likely that something like that might happen. But I had a lot of hope at that time, thinking, good God, this is going to lead to so many other people. And if only they could get the information out of him before something terrible happens. Well, 66-year-old financier and convicted pedophile found dead in his prison cell. Of course, the circumstances are highly improbable. Epstein is rather tall, 6 feet, average size, but, on the taller end. And he had somehow secured a bed sheet to his bunk and then wrapped the sheet around his neck. Now, he was actually touching the floor. Anybody who's killing themselves using a sheet, you got to put yourself into a position where you can't stop yourself. But of course, that wasn't Jeffrey Epstein. And there's all the stuff about the autopsy and how none of that lined up with the circumstances you would expect to see in a suicide by hanging. Of course, there definitely were injuries that you would expect to see in a death by strangulation. Well, yesterday, a judge unsealed the suicide note that we recently learned had been found in Jeffrey Epstein's cell. And the suicide note in that cell said the following. They investigated for a month, found nothing. So 16-year-old charges results. It is a treat to be able to say goodbye. Time to say goodbye. What you want me to do? Burst out crying? No fun. Not worth it. Now, he doesn't sign it. The handwriting is pretty awful. Jeffrey Epstein didn't have the best handwriting, but this is the sort of thing that I could see being written under duress. And, of course, he didn't put his signature on it. Now, I haven't seen anyone do a significant breakdown of the actual writing itself. I don't have another sample of Jeffrey Epstein's handwriting to even compare this against, so I'm not exactly certain how they're claiming forensically that this was Jeffrey Epstein's suicide note. But that is the narrative that we're being given. And so, all of the problems that I already mentioned notwithstanding, of course, we were also told that no one came into Jeffrey Epstein's area of the prison. But, of course, when the federal government released the tapes from the security cameras, we learned that, well, actually it did look like somebody came in there. There was a flash of orange. And you know who wears orange in a prison? Well, the prisoners. So it seems rather likely that another prisoner in the prison went in there and strangled Jeffrey Epstein. And I've always thought that his cellmate, who was a killer cop who was in jail awaiting trial for the murder of several drug dealers, I've always thought, Nicholas Tartagliano, I think his name was. I'd have to look it up. I've always thought that he was the most likely person. I mean, he's in there with him. And Jeffrey Epstein had actually told his lawyer that this guy had tried to strangle him previously. This was the first alleged suicide attempt where Jeffrey Epstein was taken out of that cell, put into the shoe, and then put on suicide watch. So either way.
8 p.m. The report says someone, probably Noel, carries a bundle of bedding or clothing up the stairs. It's a rare instance the video does catch movement on the stairs, but barely. Let's see that zoomed in and in slow motion again. Several of the video forensic experts we spoke with were skeptical about the report's conclusion and thought that the video could be showing an inmate walking up the stairs. Authorities say this was the last time anyone approached his cell block until his body was discovered the next morning. Again, while the video does not contradict that, experts who viewed the video say the limited field of view makes it impossible to definitively conclude that no one used those stairs in that time period. Beyond this, there are other issues our investigation and others have uncovered. At 11:21 p.m. and 34 seconds, a cursor appears briefly on screen, indicating the video may have been recorded with a camera or a screen recording and was not an export of the raw file. The FBI said it had seized the prison's hard drive at 8 p.m.
There's also the initial report that the hard drives were destroyed, that the cameras looking at his cell were mysteriously not working. Of course, the prison guards fell asleep at an inopportune time, but while they were alleged to have been asleep, they were doing searches for Jeffrey Epstein on the internet. And then, of course, there is the question of the body itself. Besides the forensic evidence suggesting that someone killed Jeffrey Epstein or killed the person who was passed off as Jeffrey Epstein, of course, we've done a number of comparisons here before of the body itself to pictures of Jeffrey Epstein. Personally, whoever that is that's dead in that cell, I don't believe it to be Jeffrey Epstein. I believe that someone died in that cell, but I don't believe that it was Jeffrey Epstein. What we have is effectively the murder of Jeffrey Epstein, quote unquote, not the suicide of Jeffrey Epstein. And effectively, that's what we have because Jeffrey Epstein is no longer part of the story. The man was removed in one form or another. And knowing what we know about Jeffrey Epstein planning to cooperate with the federal government, I think the most likely scenario is that he was taken out of the prison, death was faked, Jeffrey Epstein in witness protection. A lot of people love to say, oh, well, that person, they're just in witness protection. I think people default to that all too often when there's really nothing to even suggest that that's the case. I think sometimes people are dead, but this is not one of those times. I don't believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself or that Jeffrey Epstein was even wheeled out of that prison on that gurney. All right. Now, Decoherence Media has put something together called Epstein.photos. And they say in the announcement, we are using facial recognition to identify more than 400 people who appear in photos from the Epstein files and mapped out their connections. 170 of them have not previously been reported on in connection with Jeffrey Epstein. Explore this data with our new website, epstein.photos. Really interesting idea, and I applaud them for this. These include the co-founder of MTV, John Sykes. Currently, John Sykes is president of Entertainment Enterprise at iHeartMedia. He is shown in Epstein's private plane, and his name is on a flight log from October of 2004. Interestingly enough, many years ago, while reporting on Jeffrey Epstein, I was actually banned from iHeartMedia. I wonder if it was in relation to Jeffrey Epstein reporting. Here is John Sykes on Jeffrey Epstein's private plane, passed out. I wonder if this is Ghislaine or this is another one of Jeffrey Epstein's girls, but there is a front profile picture of the man. And here is the flight logs showing that he actually flew on that plane. Bahraini Prince Sheikh Mohammed Al Khalifa is shown in a picture from Tancredi Marchiolo to Epstein. Marchiolo writes in an October 2013 email to Epstein, I'm coming to Paris Monday and leaving Tuesday with the Prince of Bahrain. Are you in town? Epstein replied, Monday night free. And here we have that picture. And this is him right here in his Bahraini prince getup. So you can see that face. And that is him right here with the thumbs up. We've also found a picture of Google co-founder Sergey Brin on Guana Island. Actually, we have shown this picture here on the show before. He's standing just a few feet away from alleged sex trafficker Jean-Luc Brunel. Ghislaine Maxwell sent Epstein an email in December 26, 2006. Sergey Brin and his girlfriend Anne, my friend, are going to stay at Guana. There is Sergey right there. The man in the back is Jean-Luc Brunel. Here is another photo of Sergey. This one has already been confirmed. And then here is that email from Ghislaine Maxwell. So they say we just published a guide to the website that covers how to use it, our methodology, and how we decided who to name. The homepage shows a network visualization of everyone we've identified. Nodes are people, and edges between nodes are within the two people who have appeared together in the photo in the Epstein timeline. You can see that a little bit better right here. And obviously, the closer you are to Jeffrey Epstein, the closer your association is with him as well. The people page shows the faces and the names of everyone we've identified. You can search by name and filter results based on whether we know their name, named versus unnamed. And they also show the number of photos in which these people appear. So as an example, in the Epstein photos, Jeffrey Epstein has 4,486 pictures where he is in it. And then Ghislaine Maxwell has 696 appearances in those photos. Jean-Luc Brunel, 364. Woody Allen, 281. Donald Trump, 169. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, 164, and then so on and so on. And that includes people like Bill Clinton, Noam Chomsky's wife, Valerie Chomsky, Nadia Marcinko, of course, Doug Band, John Brockman, Barry Josephson. The list goes on and on and on. Then you can actually go to the search page. The search page lets you search photos by the person's name or the document number. And we can see all photos containing two individuals like Jean-Luc Brunel and Ghislaine Maxwell, and the artificial intelligence facial recognition software will show you a box around that person's face so that you know who it is that you're looking for. And it actually highlights their name in the color that the box will be highlighted in the image itself. So a very, very cool tool for people to use. Great for research. If you want to go through and perhaps create additional connections, and if you want to start digging into some of these people yourself. There are still thousands of people who we have not yet identified. You can view them on the people page, filtering only to show unknown people. So if you have information about any of those unknown individuals, you can send us a tip using the form linked on the About page. Researchers, journalists, or organizations that would like to get our data or collaborate, don't hesitate to contact us. The project took us nearly 2 months. If you value our work, consider donating or subscribing to Decoherence Media. We are a completely reader-supported nonprofit newsroom. I am going to go ahead and follow them because I think that this deserves it. So definitely wanted to make sure you guys are aware. Decoherence Media on X. It's at __ decoherence __ I don't know why they had to throw those in. Maybe just because they wanted decoherence and somebody else already had it, but definitely something to check out. All right. Now, thank you very much to Sean Joe for the cookie. Thank you to Filter Dog, who says this guy lost his district. Yes, we are going to, might as well just talk about it right now. Yes, Tennessee has successfully redistricted their state. And that means that the governor has signed into law the new congressional map, which gives Steve Cohen a new job. He's no longer going to be a congressman. So Bill Lee, having signed this new congressional redistricting map in the state of Tennessee, has effectively redistricted Steve Cohen out of a job. That majority-minority black district that was drawn to give a black district to the state of Tennessee is, of course, unconstitutional. This is now going to make Tennessee a 9-0 GOP delegation. And so Cohen is out. And I mentioned him the other day, but he was the guy who showed up with a bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken and ate it in the midst of what otherwise should have been some pretty important testimony. Thank you to Sean Joe as well for the cookie. Thank you to Q Shook Me All Night Long for the cookie. God bless America. And thank you to Moon Baby, who says, what up, family? What up, family? Thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. All right, you guys. Let us talk about the Disney situation. Again, yesterday, all we knew was that Customs and Border Patrol, ICE, and Homeland Security investigations had showed up and arrested roughly 10 illegal aliens or 10 non-U.S. citizens that were working on the Disney Magic Cruise line of ships. Well, it turns out that it was a lot more than simply a question of immigration. This was quite literally an international child porn operation where these people were citizens of other countries. They were child predators that had gained employment in the Disney Magic Cruise Line ecosystem. And it was actually 5 different cruise ships that were boarded, not only a Disney cruise ship, but they were docked in San Diego between April 23rd and 25th. And this was an investigation seeking the producers and purveyors of child sexual exploitation material, also known as child sexual abuse material. CSAM, CSEM, they are interchangeable. Yesterday, we saw the images of these people being arrested, but now, just a little while removed from the initial report, we learned that after boarding the vessels and interviewing 26 suspected crew members, these were from the Philippines, 1 suspected crew member from Portugal, another one from Indonesia, officers confirmed that all subjects were involved in either the receipt, possession, transportation, distribution, or the viewing of child sexual exploitation material, also known as child pornography. So the Customs and Border Patrol immediately canceled their visas, and these criminals were then removed from the ships. They will now be removed from our country, and they will be taken back to their countries of origin to face justice. We have a zero tolerance policy for this type of behavior and fully cooperated with law enforcement. While the majority of these individuals were not from our cruise line, those who were are no longer with the company. That's a statement from Disney. Now, it's unclear what other ships exactly these additional crew members may have been working on, but considering the fact that 5 ships were boarded, and obviously this is a busy port, I think it's safe to say that any cruise line may be up for consideration here. This is also obviously very disturbing because families bring their children on these cruises. Parents have an expectation of safety and privacy when they go on these cruise ships. Now, passengers aboard the Disney cruise ship, these are the ones who spoke out that we mentioned yesterday. They were stunned when they documented multiple employees getting arrested. Vacationers watched as immigration officials cuffed these employees on the Disney Magic ship as they were being unloaded. The passenger who took that video is the one who said that they were totally upset. They couldn't believe it that these people were being arrested. What are their families going to do? There were a number of pro-immigrant groups that came out and they put out statements angry with ICE and Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection, saying that, oh, this is a travesty. These people are being arrested without due process. Little did they know that these people were purveyors of child pornography, some of the most disgusting individuals. Will they walk back those statements? Will they put out corrections suggesting that they're no longer upset that child abusers were being arrested and removed from America, where they have a greater opportunity to victimize children? Probably not. I don't think these groups have any sort of soul whatsoever. Prior to the news about what these arrests were for, we had several immigration rights groups up in arms about these so-called seafarers who were arrested. And, of course, the port of San Diego, they wanted to make sure everybody was aware, well, we had nothing to do with these arrests. This was a federal operation entirely. We would never get involved in the arrest of these innocent seafarers. Well, those innocent seafarers were notorious child sexual abusers. So I hope that something happens to them when they're in custody. All right. Now, we also have some really incredible news. President Trump has just completely flipped the game on its head. All right. He announced that the United States has completely rethought our counterterrorism strategy. And this has everything to do with these radical left-wing NGOs, Antifa, these pro-trans activists that are trying to manipulate your children. And his administration put out its new counterterrorism strategy. This is a document which basically outlines how we are now going to approach these things and what we are taking most seriously. Of course, there is also another document, the National Security Strategy. All of it together outlines the new priorities for the United States government and U.S. officials. Who and what are we going to target? So this new document unleashes a lot of criticism on Europe. We already know that a lot of these left-wing organizations have international arms in Europe. And that international aspect to these groups is one of the reasons that Antifa was rebranded as an international criminal terrorist organization. So after the National Security Strategy was released, it was said that the continent is facing civilizational erasure due to unchecked migration. Obviously, that is another huge aspect of the national security strategy, stopping these people from wholesale coming into our country. So U.S. President Donald Trump's administration has accused Europe of being an incubator for terrorism, fueled by mass migration, in a new counterterrorism strategy that was released yesterday. That new strategy focuses on rooting out violent left-wing extremists, notably radically pro-transgender groups, while placing Latin American drug cartels at the center of concerns. So it's no secret and no coincidence that yesterday we had that huge bust in MacArthur Park in Los Angeles, where they found $20 million or so in fentanyl and crystal methamphetamine. There was also a huge bust in Washington, D.C. as well. A number of men were just charged and arrested with the importation of fentanyl, crystal meth, and GBL, which is the precursor for GHB. So that is a huge, huge win as well. But let's take a look at this. This is, first of all, Sebastian Gorka. Sebastian Gorka talking about, well, shoot, I'll probably have to delete this off of YouTube, but it doesn't matter. Let's check it out.
Oh my gosh, Bev, it couldn't be more different because we're not using counterterrorism and national security tools to persecute those we politically disagree with. The Biden administration did exactly that. They called Catholics who go to Latin Mass domestic terrorists. They used armed agents of federal law enforcement to raid the home of a former president. They even put politicians who agreed with President Trump, but who had been Democrats, like Tulsi Gabbard, on terrorist no-fly lists. We are not allowing politics to be perverting national security. We're getting back to real threats, whether they are jihadists, whether they are cartels, or whether they are violent left-wing anarchists, extremists, groups like Antifa, who target conservatives and killed my good friend, Charlie Kirk.
So this is so incredible, and it's a move that's been being made in the background for quite some time. We know that violent left-wing extremists that are propped up by these left-wing international NGOs are the engine of the paid protest movement here in the United States of America. The faux outrage that we see every time the administration attempts to do something, these protests that we see popping up out of nowhere with signs that are produced by the same individuals. And a lot of that has to do with the money coming out of Europe being used, sent to the United States of America to prop up these groups. Some of the strongest language is reserved for Europe, home to numerous U.S. allies who will be alarmed to see that their continent is in the Trump administration's crosshairs once again. It's clear to all that well-organized hostile groups exploit open borders and related globalist ideals. The more these alien cultures grow and the longer current European policies persist, the more terrorism is guaranteed, the strategy says. You know who's not listed in there? Russia. As the birthplace of Western culture and values, Europe must act now and halt its willful decline, said the strategy. Now, again, this is harkening back to many things President Trump has said previously. So what this prioritizes is the elimination of cartel networks, such as those networks in Mexico and, of course, in South and Central America, targeting these foreign terrorist organizations, which include those same drug dealing organizations and Antifa, but cracking down on domestic extremist groups like Antifa. This portends major actions that we will be seeing here in the United States. This is not just lip service to the base, calling out Antifa. Violent left-wing extremists and extremist transgender ideology are among the most concerning threats facing the country, according to the administration. Now, we've already seen a number of high-profile cases. Of course, during the mass roundups of illegal aliens that was happening during these surges in various cities. Of course, there were attacks on ICE facilities in a number of ways. There were, of course, terrorist attacks that were made on individual buildings, on whether it was a Republican headquarters or Teslas or the ICE facilities themselves. The administration says we see a threat, we will respond to it, we will crush it. Whether it's the cartels, the jihadis, or violent left-wing extremists like Antifa and these transgender killers, the non-binary, the left-wing radicals who killed Charlie Kirk, we will take them head on. And that is Senior Director for Counterterrorism, Sebastian Gorka, speaking about this. Now, I have another clip here, breaking down some of those groups that we're going to be looking at as well. Some of the things they are looking for. Opposition to capitalism, pro-communist and socialist beliefs, anti-fascist cosplay, BLM-style chaos, LGBTQ extremism, environmental terrorists, all of them. Each and every one of these ideologies is part of that same group of people that have been seeking to destroy God-fearing, country-loving American citizens, and their actions were then wrapped into the ideology of the ruling party when they came after us for merely trying to assert our rights. There's a fine line between liberty and terrorism, and these people that they are now targeting, they're the terrorists.
Cause to stir. Opposition to capitalism, imperialism or colonialism. We hear those chants all the time. They're ridiculous. Support for LGBTQ rights, support for environmental causes or animal rights, adherence to pro-communist, pro-socialist beliefs or anti-fascist rhetoric, which we hear nonstop, and opposition to government authority. Now, the thing is, you can believe that, you can get together. They're worried about when it leads to violence, and then Treasury could play a big role, right?
Yeah, absolutely. As we saw with Operation Economic Fury, you know, the counterpart to Epic Fury, you can now apply the entire toolkit that Treasury, I'm telling you, as a detective, we salivated over the ability that the federal government had with IRS and Treasury to go after money, to go after sanctions.
Now, just imagine, if you will, for a moment, some of the largest players in this segment, Neville Roy Singham, George Soros, the Tides Foundation, Arabella, which has obviously spun off into something else right now. But these groups funnel a tremendous amount of money into these left-wing causes, and they spur on these left-wing terrorists and all of these ridiculous activists. But what they're doing is subverting the United States of America, and they are creating an environment where terrorism persists. Terrorism in an overt manner, where there's actual physical attacks, but then also terrorism in an ideological manner. So these realignments of the national security strategy, as they are suggesting right here, it gives the United States Treasury, Scott Bessent, the power to go after those people, because George Soros and Neville Roy Singham, they may not be operating within the United States of America, but make no mistake, they are American citizens. Their money is here in the United States. And even if it's not here in the United States, it's in banks that the United States has treaties with. In terms of a national security reason to come in and seize funds, they would have the power to do that.
This is something now that can now be done that will impact us at the state and local level. This is a huge change. And it's follow the money, right? Follow the money. You don't go after people for ideology. We've got to be careful from a First Amendment standpoint. But when that ideology leads to violence, now they become a target. Now you apply the whole toolkit. And when you disrupt their money, I'm telling you, Brian, most of these groups are not flush with cash. You start disrupting that. You start disrupting their recruiting capability, you can have a huge impact in a very short amount of time.
Don't you believe that a lot of this money comes from our adversaries, Russia, North Korea?
I don't, personally. It may be coming from certain elements within other countries, but I would say that Russia is not the source of a lot of this. I truly do believe that the goals of Russia, ideologically, spiritually, and geopolitically, they align with the United States. And the same people that Russia is fighting against, and they've done a tremendous job in making sure these people don't get a foothold in their country, are the exact same people that we're fighting against right now. Of course, Brian's a moron, really, at the end of the day. I mean, he's a normie. He doesn't really think about the deeper meanings of this. One of the big problems that we've had is that a lot of this money is coming from stateless entities, these NGOs. They're not countries. It's not the same type of fight that we had during the Cold War. And it's one of the reasons these people have been so effective in undermining the United States of America. Here, once again, is Sebastian Gorka, because he is the counterterrorism director. He is directly involved in this. I need to say thank you so much to the Nun Report for rating the stream. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Also, thank you to Siesta Randy for tipping with the Rumble wallet. And let me see if there was a message. No message attached to that. But Randy, thank you, sir, for the Bitcoin. I do appreciate it. Yeah, we have more in common with Russia than a lot of normies understand. Certainly when it comes to our faith and our desire to exercise our regional authority and our own sovereignty. Keep in mind also, at the same time that now this is being announced, we've talked very recently about President Trump sort of dismantling the geopolitical rules-based order. That rules-based order is what gave rise to the NGO industrial complex, which gave rise to the infiltration of these groups into our country, which gave rise to the destruction of the United States. Everything that we see happening, and I have said this so many times before, I do not see this as a series of disconnected events. I see this as a series of interconnected plays, which are all leading to the golden age, the ultimate saving of not only the United States of America, but the saving of the entire world, which is why I feel so excited about all of this. If you look around and you say, okay, well, Trump's just doing a bunch of random things that, have nothing to do with the other. I mean, step back and think about this for a second. This man is not unintelligent. Okay, he knows what he's doing. He absolutely has some of the brightest minds, intellectually, economically, socially, politically, working with him to help implement the play of plays. You may not believe in 4D chess, but that's okay. You don't have to, because President Trump may be playing whether you like it or not.
Thank you kindly. Yeah, my incredible team have been working on this since the second inauguration of President Trump. We waited until the president signed and released the national security strategy in December. This nests under that and the national defense strategy. In one sentence, we are returning to common sense, reality-based counterterrorism. One of the first things the president says in his trenchant foreword, and then we stress later on page 1, is that we will not permit the most powerful national security tools in the world, especially underneath the counterterrorism rubric, to be used for political purposes against innocent Americans. We're not going to allow, as the Biden administration did, Catholics in Richmond to be targeted because they go to Latin Mass, members of Congress like Tulsi Gabbard to be put on no-fly lists, or to use armed federal law enforcement to raid the home of a former president, as happened at Mar-a-Lago because President Trump was going to win that election. We're not going to let that happen, so we're going to rip politics out of counterterrorism, and then we're going to focus on the real threats in 3 main threat groups. Number 1, the cartels, under the incredible leadership of the Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller, the new S1, the new Secretary at Homeland Security, Senator Mullen, and then, of course, the second category is my remit, the global jihadi movement, so dealing the ultimate death blows to groups like Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And then the third category, sadly, because the left has normalized violence or made it a permissible thing to do, we're going to identify and neutralize the left-wing radicals like Antifa, like the anarchists who took the life of my good friend Charlie Kirk, that have tried on multiple occasions to kill President Trump. We will not permit you to use violence against your fellow Americans for political purposes.
Now, I want to posit something else to you. Perhaps one of the reasons that we haven't seen major movement in the investigations related to President Trump's multiple attempted assassinations is because they're going to roll it into this national security component. Does anyone here believe for a second that these attempted assassinations against this president have perhaps not been funded either in part or in whole by the very same groups that he is now announcing we are going to be going after? I truly believe that. And if they want to do this most effectively, if they want to have the greatest effect and ensure that it doesn't happen again in the future, this would be the smartest play to do that. Now, he mentioned new Secretary of Homeland Security, Markwayne Mullin. There's been a lot of talk in the last couple of days, reported by major mainstream outlets, that, they're shutting down Alligator Alcatraz, which is, of course, being reported as it's a huge loss for the administration. They're not actually doing mass deportations. They're shutting down Alligator Alcatraz. That means that they're just going to let everybody stay. President Trump is considering doing some type of amnesty. Well, that's absolutely not what's happening. Markwayne Mullin has announced that we are actually now going to be going into New York. And since we've had that win in the courts, which have stated that we no longer have to worry about judicial warrants, we can just go in and arrest people with administrative warrants, that makes it a lot easier. And slowly, in the background, as there seems to be this chaos in the foreground, that's what people are paying attention to. The pieces that needed to be put into play to make it easier for arrests and deportations to happen They've actually been taking place. Let's take a listen.
Every single day. We have a great relationship. I couldn't do this job without him. He's somebody I lean on every single day. We're not going into New York like another Minneapolis, but what we're going to do is we're going to go in there and we're going to go after the felons, the known felons. We're going to be serving judicial warrants. We're going to be using administrative warrants in some cases, but there's a lot of known criminals that are harboring themselves in New York. And the governor knows this. The mayor knows this. The city officials there know this. They know these warrants because we've asked for their assistance in helping them pick up these individuals. They have flat out told us no. So President Trump has made it very clear we're going to restore law and order in everybody's city and everybody's states and everybody's community that we can. So we're going in there to get the worst of the worst out of New York, regardless what the governor says or not. Every single day. We have a great relationship.
Now, Alligator Alcatraz is winding down, but it's not because we are not going to be deporting people. It's because Alligator Alcatraz was always meant to be a temporary facility, as these permanent facilities were coming online in the background. And yes, quietly in the background, that was happening. So now Alligator Alcatraz will be used basically as a runway so that we can fly people out of Florida, but it will no longer be necessary to use it as an overflow for people to be held there. Now, here is Tom Homan assuring the American people that amnesty is not on the table. So no matter what the mainstream media tells you, no matter what some talking head or a podcaster might say, amnesty is not an option.
Talking points were taken out of context. That interview, we opened the interview when we talking about policies, talking about where do we go from here, right? Because President Trump did executive orders, had the most secure border ever in Trump 45. President Biden came in, undid it all through executive order. President Trump came back in through executive order. Now we have the most secure border ever in history of this nation. My first comment was, we need congressional action to solidify this and enshrine this into law, so the next president doesn't come in and undo it all again through executive order. When we're talking about the non-criminal people being here ever, I said discussions are ongoing all the time. For instance, just recently there's been discussion about the Dignified Act that some members of Congress are pushing. There's always conversations going on, but let me tell you this, and I mean this. President Trump's been clear from day one. Amnesty's off the table. He don't support amnesty in any form, either do I.
Okay, I wanted to clarify that because when it looked like that interview that there were, it looked like that you were saying there are members of the cabinet inside of President Trump's administration talking to him about amnesty.
Look, but it's not amnesty. It's not amnesty. We're talking about what can Congress do, in the future on immigration. But look, right behind me, the White House, you have White House Legislative Affairs, and they spend every day talking to members of Congress about legislation. But the president's been clear from day one. Amnesty's off the table.
Amnesty is not going to happen. We have tens of millions of illegal aliens that we need to get out of this country. Now, yesterday, there was a story that I wanted to get to, but I never got the chance. There was a man down in Texas who was out shopping with his family. His entire family was in his vehicle, and some crazed man who was unidentified because he was an illegal alien first crashed his car into somebody else, left the scene of the accident, tried to steal a number of vehicles from people, and then he squared up against the wrong man, a man who simply was willing to protect his family. And because it's Texas, he was also legally armed. So this Texas father ended up shooting this illegal alien dead as he was attempting to steal his car with his family inside. The carjacker approached the vehicle. He kind of squared up with the dad, shoved his way into the car. Before he could turn the car on and take off with the baby in a car seat in the back, there were 2 adult females. There were also multiple other children inside. The dad opened fire, he shot and killed him. So the carjacker was taken to the hospital, and he ended up succumbing to his injuries. And again, it was reported yesterday that they couldn't figure out the identity of that man, because effectively he had no identity in the United States of America. He was here illegally. Let's go ahead and take a look at the reporting from the local Texas news.
66 and Dairy Road. Police say the man had tried to steal several vehicles by force before trying this one. He was taken to a hospital and pronounced dead. Fox 4's David Sintendry has more from the investigation. David.
Let me also just say this father was very patient. The moment that guy would shove me away from my car with my family inside, that would have been it.
The majority of family members were inside that vehicle as the carjacker tried to take off with it. The father of that family shot and killed the suspect, and it was all captured on video.
You could definitely tell that he was not in his right state of mind.
Surveillance video shows a man attacking and trying to carjack a family of 8 in Garland Sunday afternoon before the father shoots and kills him.
I'm just glad that the man was able to protect himself and his family.
Tatiana Starks manages Garland Smoke and Vape in a shopping center near Highway 66 and Dairy Road.
We heard a loud crash.
Garland Police Department says the carjacker initially crashed into 2 other vehicles.
While we were responding to the scene, we received more information that the driver of that car had exited and immediately began physically trying to get into other vehicles in that parking lot.
Starks says she saw the man breaking into several vehicles at a gas station, so she took cell phone footage.
He tried to get in several different cars.
She stopped recording as the man began walking across the street toward her.
Did he make direct eye contact with you?
Yes, he was walking very intentionally.
The family of 8 unaware of what was happening and what was about to happen.
He ended up going into their car.
Video shows the carjacker in the peach shirt confronting the father in the white shirt. The father struggles with the suspect, who's trying to drive off with the family's car, with family members inside, including a baby. After nearly a minute of struggle, the carjacker, who's in the driver's seat, is shot by the father, who's outside the car near the passenger side door.
It seemed to be self-defense.
Police do not expect to file charges against the father.
It kind of all really happened really fast.
Starks, a witness to everything, just grateful we're talking about a story in which no victims were hurt.
It's just a blessing that the kids and the family walked away with no injuries.
All right. So at the time that was published, Fox 4 Dallas had not been able to identify Jose Ramirez. He was a 30-year-old illegal alien. He was a Mexican national living here in the United States. We have no idea when Ramirez entered the country. And, of course, no charges are going to be filed against that father. Ramirez crashed into 2 different vehicles around 3:30 p.m., did cause some injuries to other people. When officers got there, they learned that this passenger had left the scene. He went across the street to a gas station, and then they learned that he was trying to steal other people's cars. And thank God that the guy that he ultimately tried to steal his car from was a father who was armed and who was willing to protect himself and his family. So good look on trigger discipline, because obviously a car full of kids, that could have went real bad if somebody hadn't been thinking about it as clearly as that father did. Chief Fontez says if money is coming in from Israel, there's money coming in from the Muslim Brotherhood or their hosting nations, one way or another, and the anti-Israel PSYOP successful as I'd ever recognized. So, I mean, quite literally, there is a potential that it could be coming in from any number of places, but I think that it would be more likely, rather than money coming directly from the nation of Israel, it would be coming from people that are private individuals who are donating to those NGOs. And they could be citizens of Israel, they could be Jews, they could be Muslims, they could be Christians, there could be any number of people. But most often, these NGOs have just a sort of generalized left-wing alliance. Now, it would be really incredible if we learn that perhaps there's some connection to the Southern Poverty Law Center. There is also undoubtedly going to be connections to the United Nations. There could be specific connections to citizens from any of those European nations that were mentioned. But I think that nothing is off the table at this point. Denise Ann says, I'm very glad that the father was able to protect his family. Question, though, if the father had been white, would media be praising him? That's a question that I considered myself, but obviously it's a hypothetical, so we don't know. I don't know what the general racial makeup is down there in Garland, Texas, but, I would hope that they would have praised him in the exact same way as they did. Because this guy was black, but they didn't even mention that he was black. So, I don't know. It's all hypothetical. All right. Now, we also do have an announcement on the health status of Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor. He is out of the ICU now, and he's going to be spending time at home before leaving the Florida hospital where he's been for the last few days. Rudy is completely out of the ICU. He's breathing on his own. His advisor, Ted Goodman, put out a statement and said, Mayor Rudy Giuliani is out of the ICU and will spend some time recovering before leaving the hospital. The mayor and his family appreciate the outpouring of love and prayers that were sent his way. So it would appear that Rudy is on the mend and he's no longer in critical condition. That is good news. All right. Now, we also have an update on the situation with Virginia and Senator Louise Lucas. But first of all, we're going to talk about a little bit of new information that came from the FBI. Many people have heard of ex-FBI agent Kyle Seraphin. He initially came out as a whistleblower. Now he's a podcaster, and he's kind of made a name for himself as a professional shit poster online, stirring up trouble, getting into arguments with people. He started a war with my friend BX, who was trying to expose an international child abuse network in 764. For some inexplicable reason, Kyle thought it was a good idea to attack a single mom who was doing good work, exposing child predators. And, you know, whatever. I don't know the reason that Kyle did that. But Kyle had said that he was essentially pushed out of the FBI because he was a whistleblower. But it turns out that Kyle actually might have performed a desk pop at the FBI. He was accused of intentionally and unsafely firing his gun just before being ousted. Now, Kyle Seraphin told Just the News he was just dicking around in a firearms incident that an FBI human resources official and others said violated the Bureau's safe weapons handling policies. This incident was part of a pattern of behavior that led to his suspension, according to a former colleague and internal FBI interviews that were performed by Just the News. So, Kyle Seraphin was kicked out of the FBI after he intentionally discharged his weapon in an unsafe manner on a training range while his instructor was in the line of fire, which is a pretty serious thing to do. Now, the records were obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, and they show from court filings. Kyle was permanently suspended from the FBI on June 1st, 2022. 8 weeks after the incident at a New Mexico gun range on April 1st. The incident was deemed so reckless that he was referred to FBI Internal Affairs. Seraphin acknowledged that this actually happened in an interview last year with Just the News. He said he was just dicking around when he fired his weapon at his supervisor's target at the range in 2022, but he insisted the incident should not have led to his suspension and termination, and he believes he was a victim of whistleblower retaliation. He has leveraged his story as an alleged whistleblower who exposed anti-Catholic bias and resisted the FBI's vaccine mandate under former Director Christopher Wray. And, of course, he has used that to sort of position himself within the larger right-wing truth community. But, you know, I've always felt that Kyle was a plant of sorts. Put himself together as part of this group called the Suspendables. His notoriety has also landed him in a defamation lawsuit brought by FBI Director Kash Patel's girlfriend. Kyle had publicly accused her of being an Israeli Mossad honeypot. And by presenting himself as a whistleblower, of course, people automatically look at that and they say, well, he must be a good guy. He's a whistleblower. But in fact, you know, he actually fired his weapon downrange while his instructor was in the line of fire. That's a big no-no. Definitely not something you're supposed to do. All right. Now, next, Lee Walden says, hi, Zach, subject NGOs, when were they created and who thought that they should have all this influence? Well, NGOs are merely, it's another word for nonprofit organizations, okay? So 501c3 organizations have been around for a long time. It's a status, a tax deduction status here in the United States. I don't know when they first started gaining power and influence, but I mean, inevitably, it would be the point at which government functions began to be pushed into the private sector, and then funding goes into those sectors, giving tremendous power and influence to those organizations through money. It would be a dive that I have not done intentionally for this story, for this show. Would have to go back and look at it. Don't know when 501c3s first became a thing. You know, oftentimes people just say the nonprofits or NGOs shouldn't exist. Certainly, I don't think that government functions should be given to private organizations, and therefore giving public money to these private organizations to do that. That shouldn't be a thing. But there are a lot of nonprofits who actually do good work, and they still fall within the same banner of the category of organization. So I don't think it's fair to say that these organizations wholesale should be taken off the table. But certainly every single one, I think, should be they should be scrutinized to a much greater degree than what they are. And now that we have this realignment of our national security strategy, we may be seeing that happen. All right, now let's go into the update on Senator Louise Lucas. Now, yesterday, we learned about the FBI raiding her office and 10 of those marijuana dispensaries. We learned about her health care wing, which is Lucas Lodge, lots of Medicaid dollars coming in. We learned about Lucas Transportation, more Medicaid dollars coming in. But there is another that was located, Southside Direct Care Provider, LLC, also bringing in a lot of Medicaid dollars. Now, besides the ownership and the Medicaid connection and the same pattern that we see in all of these other fraudulent Medicaid-funded industries in places like Ohio and Minnesota and Maine, these three organizations have something else in common. It would appear that they were all funneling money directly into Louise Lucas and her daughter's political campaigns over the years. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars going from Medicaid money into these organizations owned by the Lucas family, and then once again going directly into the campaign coffers of the Lucases, effectively giving them money to remain in power to ensure that this money keeps flowing. Absolutely incredible. And there is more to this, but hold on. I actually found this clip of somebody in Virginia talking about the history of Louise Lucas. Take a listen to this. Apparently, several years ago, she had criminal charges that were filed against her, and they actually went nowhere, probably because of how powerful she is.
There was a lot of surprise around the country yesterday with these FBI raids in Portsmouth, but for us here in Virginia, it did not necessarily come as a big shock, and let me give you some context. Senator Louise Lucas has been a fixture in Virginia politics for decades and decades. She's one of the most powerful senators, chairing the Finance and Appropriations Committee, has huge power. She has always sort of operated on the edge of legality, whether it's with her cannabis businesses that operate sort of in the gray zone, whether it's been how she talks about lobbyists and donors, whether it's been actual criminal charges that she had a while ago that ended up going nowhere. But the point is, she's always appeared to be on the edge. And listen, I'm a defense attorney. She's entitled.
So always appeared to be on the edge of legality. Now, let's take a look at this article that I found as well. This has to do with her various Medicaid businesses. So she and her family actually have a total of 12 connected entities, and Lucas Lodge LLC that we spoke about a little bit more in depth yesterday is apparently the main one. Lucas Lodge is 100% Medicaid funded. It's a community-based residential treatment facility serving individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. The operation has 8 group homes. They have approximately 32 beds, and they've been running full-time since 1998, which is 28 years. For their billings with Medicaid, the number we talked about yesterday was the annual billings. But if we look at the entire time that they've been in business, over 20 years, it's estimated that the Lucas Lodge has brought in somewhere between $42.3 and $48.5 million. Now, that's Medicaid. They're not eligible for Medicare. And they have, as I said yesterday, over that time since 2021, had 217 violations and citations with 9 deaths across that time as well. 143 were serious incidents which involved injuries. That's since 2019. And Lucas's presence on the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee is notable because they're the ones who handle and control Medicaid and DMAS funding. And she also sits on the Senate Education and Healthcare Committee, which oversees DBHDS. That is the regulator of the facilities that she actually owns. And it also controls DMAS, which is the agency that actually pays out her claims. So Louise's empire revolves truly at the end of the day around these businesses which are being funded through federal dollars. She is the arbiter of what happens, where that money flows, ensuring that it continues to come into her own pockets and accounts. So this is starting to open up into a much bigger snapshot of how Louise is as powerful as she is. We have a mass, wide-scale operation funded entirely by U.S. taxpayer dollars. She has a safety violation record that anybody should have been paying attention to, but when the fox is guarding the hen house, perhaps that makes it a little bit more understandable why you don't see anybody doing anything about it. So Louise is effectively writing her own checks. And her entire empire beyond Lucas Lodge. She has a sprawling web of at least 11 additional interconnected business and entities that's centered heavily in Portsmouth, Virginia. Many do directly profit from Medicaid-funded services for the vulnerable with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and then others are seemingly feeding directly into her political machine. Okay, so again, we had Lucas Lodge. We also have the cannabis outlet, which is what was raided yesterday. They are directly adjacent to the Lucas Lodge. They're co-owned by Louise Lucas. You have the Lucas Professional Center. That's a commercial real estate hub for all of the Lucas entities. They generate roughly $250,000 in rental income every year. You have Lucas Hospitality. That's a hospitality and business entity. They reported $100,000 in campaign donations to Louise herself. Lucas Transportation, they would be under the Lucas Lodge umbrella. You have the Portsmouth Day Support Program, LLC. That is day support services, much like what we see in Minnesota and Maine and Ohio. They provide day support services for the intellectually and disabled individuals. You have the Southside Direct Care Provider. That's direct care staffing for the intellectually and developmentally disabled. And then you have the L. Louise Lucas Trust. This is the real estate trust, which holds more than 9 properties, including the group homes where her Medicaid business operates. Of course, trusts are used to help people avoid taxes and pass on generational wealth. You have Lucas for Senate, which is her political action committee, raising $1.5 million. You have the Louise Lucas Political Action Committee raising $17,465. And then you have LS Helps Biz, which is a web development company that powers the Lucas Lodge's website, most likely owned by another family member of the Lucas family. This collection of businesses are all directly connected and designed to help ensure that Louise is controlling the entirety of this business empire, and that they're likely being funded directly by U.S. taxpayer dollars. The Lucas's 10-facility footprint in Portsmouth, Virginia, is the physical locations where these businesses are operated. Her entire Medicaid-funded empire operates out of 10 known physical locations. They're all headquartered there in Portsmouth, Virginia. That would include her headquarters, her licensed group homes, and then her cannabis dispensary. And the Lucas Professional Center is one of those areas that was raided. The residential homes, these are the addresses of them. I'm not in Virginia, so I'm not going to read those off. It means nothing to me. And then the cannabis outlet, which of course was raided. Now, the real problem here is that Senator Lucas isn't simply the owner of a business, right? She's essentially owning the entire ecosystem inside which her businesses operate, because she owns the business owned by her trust. She operates the group homes. She provides the transportation. She provides all the staffing for the care centers. And now she's running the medical marijuana cannabis dispensary, which is directly connected next door to Lucas Lodge. And then, of course, again, as I said at the beginning, she chairs the committee, which ensures that the money continues to flow. And then she sits on the committee that is in charge of regulating and checking the work that she and these companies do. So this is a very well-oiled machine, and it is ripe for an investigation of corruption, bribery, and abuse. I am going to hazard a guess and say that Louise Lucas is not done being indicted, and these companies are going to be looked at, and probably already have been looked at, with a lot of heavy scrutiny. But $42.3 million in Medicaid taxpayer dollars getting funneled into the Lucas family of businesses is no small amount. Let's take a look at how that breaks down. If we're talking about the last 20 plus years, roughly $49 million. Between 2006 and 2009, the very early days of that business empire, she was bringing in about $842,000 per year already, with 4 homes and 16 residents. There is good money in taking care of sick people or disabled people. Between 2010 and 2015, Lucas expands the empire. She grew that organization to 8 homes and a total of 32 residents. That jumped billing up to $2.4 million annually. And from 2022 to 2025, billings jumped again $3.18 to $3.39 million per year, bringing the headcount dollar assignment to between $340 and $362 per day per resident. This is a very steady and reliable flow of income that increased over time. She was initially making roughly $180 a day. Now it's around $362 a day. Billings remained high even during periods of documented problems. Between 2019 and 2021, you had 102 or more serious incidents. And then, of course, from 2021 until 2026, you had another 217 violations. You had multiple deaths that were reported. Apparently, Lucas, being in charge of not only this organization, but the regulatory bodies that are supposed to oversee her organizations, she had no people pulling out family members. She had no problem filling up those beds when people died. For 2 decades, you've had taxpayers in Virginia through Medicaid and DMAS paying Lucas and her family roughly $2.1 million per year on average to operate these homes. At the same time, she's chairing the very committees that control Medicaid funding, sitting on the committee that oversees the regulator that inspect her facilities. Were inspections even happening? Was anyone actually checking to make sure that the people living in these group homes were doing the right thing, were taking care of these people? This is a major, major issue of corruption. Now, let's see. How does she bill Medicaid? A single resident in a Tier 4 group home generates up to $179,258 per year in Medicaid payments. With between 24 to 32 residents across 8 homes, that easily makes sense when we look at the $3.3 million annually in billing. And her network bills across that full vertical stack, residential group homes, plus day support, plus transportation, plus case management. These rates are 100% funded through taxpayer money from the state of Virginia. And she, again, owns the homes. She owns the real estate. She owns the transportation. She owns the company that provides the staffing. She runs the Senate Finance Committee. She does everything. Now, here are her conflicts of interest. Number 1, being the chair of the Senate Finance and Appropriations Committee, that is the agency that pays Lucas Lodge, the operation, millions of dollars annually. sitting on the Senate Education and Health Committee. That's the organization that is the regulator that would be actually citing her facilities. You have the patron of SB 30. She sponsored language that increased the developmental disability waiver rates. That directly boosted the payments that were going to her Medicare-funded businesses. She was also the co-sponsor of the cannabis legalization legislation. In 2021, that opened the cannabis outlet the same year that the legislation was passed, and now the subject of the active FBI corruption and bribery investigation is that business. You have $100,000 in campaign donations from Lucas Hospitality, which again is her company flowing into her campaign accounts. And I think it's only a matter of time before we see Miss Lucas and perhaps even her family members being indicted for quite a bit more. This is a massive conflict of interest, and it is pitch perfect example of corruption and pay to play. All right. Now, I mentioned earlier the situation with Mexico, the fact that the United States government has indicted a governor of a Mexican state as a member of the cartel, dealing drugs or allowing the dealing of drugs, working directly. This is a member of the president of Mexico's own political party. That governor is currently being protected by the Mexican National Guard. They are not handing him over. If they hand him over, then he's going to talk to the United States government, and it will prove the assertion that Mexico is a narco state, which they are. Although Mexico continues to say that they are cooperating with the United States, they're only cooperating so much. They're cooperating in so much as they need to say that they are cooperating. But of course, they're not going to cooperate enough that they'll be able to turn over and indict their own people. They will hand over drug lords when it is necessary, but they're not going to do everything that needs to be done. So Todd Blanche is asked about the operations that we've been performing to address corruption in the Mexican government.
The administration has obviously promised to bring consequences to Mexico when it comes to corrupt politicians that might have ties to the criminal cartels. We've already seen some visa revocations. What are the consequences beyond those revocations?
Well, we announced last week that there's been an indictment filed against the governor down in Mexico out of the Southern District of New York. I think that that's something that we've done in the past, but we're certainly going to continue to do that. And by the way, we have a very good relationship with the Mexican government right now. I mean, I think they recognize the importance of their relationship with us, and also that relationship now depends on cooperation and support in the immigration space, combating drug trafficking and things like that. So I don't want to suggest that our relationship is bad. To the contrary, we have a very positive relationship with a lot of the government in Mexico right now.
So could we see more indictments? Is that something that could be in the future?
Sure. Yes. I mean, we've already indicted multiple government officials out of Mexico, a judge recently as well, and so that's something that will continue. So one consequence of having a lot of the leaders of some of these cartels brought here over the past year in our cooperation with the Mexican government is some of them will likely want to cooperate, and that cooperation could lead to additional charges.
And that will be happening. We will be indicting and we will be forcing the capitulation of multiple government officials in the nation of Mexico. And that's just a foregone conclusion. The more people we wrap up in the larger network, the tighter the circle becomes, and the more likely it is that these people will be arrested. Now, the same thing is happening here in the United States. We are seeing these public corruption investigations carried out with the warrants that were served yesterday on Senator Lucas. She's not going to be the only politician, but Lee Walden says Miss Lucas can't be that smart. Someone has to be the master of her machine, follow the money. Unfortunately, due to the position that she held in the government, she was the one who was in charge of everything. And you don't have to be that smart to figure out that when you control the regulatory body that oversees the business you're running, and you control the committee that decides where the money goes for the businesses you're running, this is a great place to position yourself. This is just the way politics are played. I don't think anybody is controlling Miss Lucas. I think that she just waltzed into this position because she's a black woman in Democrat politics in Virginia, and she was corrupt from the very beginning. And that's the same for many of these politicians. They were corrupt, so they got into politics because they could capitalize on their corruption. Now, this next story is about that circle tightening here in the United States. Tulsi Gabbard has just urged Congress with new evidence, stating that President Trump, back during the 2020 election season, was misled on election security. She is declassifying more documents. Now, this is more of the same of what we've seen already. They continue to be pushing forward on information related to the security surrounding the 2020 election. And ultimately, this will lead to the ultimate proving of the stolen 2020 election. But this evidence is stacking up, provided by Tulsi Gabbard, showing that the U.S. intel community, well, they sought to downplay China's actions in 2020. President Trump was seeking re-election. They knew that if they withheld this information from him, that it would be more likely that they could keep him from taking another term directly afterwards. And they broke not only ethical rules, but they also broke legal rules. CIA Director John Ratcliffe has done much the same in helping Tulsi Gabbard to prove this position, that there was a false impression that Russia sought to influence the election, but China did not. All of the attention was placed on Russia because it was already decided that Russia was the international boogeyman. Of course, China, CCP, had influence because they had already purchased certain elements of the American political dynasty here in the United States. So Tulsi Gabbard has now spurred a new investigation into evidence that spy agencies were trying to conceal vulnerabilities in the U.S. election, and that included whistleblower claims that a CIA officer was asked to alter evidence of China meddling, and that President Trump and Congress both were intentionally kept in the dark about concerns involving China and Venezuela. Venezuela, very, very important right there. The memos indicate Gabbard's team first learned about this evidence, much of it yet classified, last year as part of a review conducted by her now disbanded Directors Initiative Group, and then recently referred it to the new Intelligence Committee Inspector General Christopher Fox. This is a move that will eventually lead to it being publicly released as declassified versions of some of the evidence. So this wide-ranging approach taken by the FBI in response to these now clearly debunked claims of so-called Trump-Russia collusion in 2016 is pretty stark in contrast to how the U.S. intelligence community buried evidence of Chinese government efforts to undermine President Trump's candidacy in the 2020 election. So the National Intelligence Council concluded in 2020 that China hacked or gained access to several state voter registration databases. This we already knew. But that information was not only hidden from the American public, it was also hidden from people in the government. It was hidden from people in Congress. It was hidden from the president himself. These new memos that Just the News were allowed to review show evidence conclusively that China gained access to between 12 and 18 states' voter registration databases, and that was in 2020 alone. This was an infiltration target which is much larger than what was previously acknowledged. They also chronicled efforts to suppress the extent of China's malicious election activities. There were whistleblower complaints from Christopher Porter, who is now a former national intelligence officer for cyber. He tried to bring it to the attention. He was directly shut down by the CIA at that time. And Fox, who is the current intel community watchdog, is currently reviewing the case that Porter had attempted to bring forward previously with these whistleblower claims, including evidence of possible retaliation during the Biden years. So the ODNI is currently in possession of allegations made by one or more intelligence officers arguing that foreign interference efforts by China were de-emphasized or omitted entirely from final analytic assessments, and they were entirely kept out of the presidential daily briefing. They were also hidden from congressional oversight. These actions within the intelligence community were taken in an effort to undercut President Trump's 2020 re-election campaign and to resist his China-related policies. One email in the possession of the ODNI allegedly states that an intelligence agency planned to massage one particular presidential briefing document meant for President Trump to dodge the mention of election influence concerns, despite the fact we possessed raw intelligence on that subject. The memos also point to emails showing alleged attempts by certain CIA officials to cover up election influence efforts by China and to push a CIA analyst to change a federal record about an agency meeting where CIA officials reportedly hinted that China-related evidence was being held back to help avoid President Trump win the 2020 election. The more evidence they could withhold from President Trump and his team, the more likely it would be that they could steal the election in 2020. That's my assessment right there. The memos also chronicle concerns about the handling of congressional briefings on foreign interference and Chinese interference attempts in 2020. The warnings raised and then purportedly suppressed inside the intelligence community in 2020 also included concerns about vulnerabilities that were tied to Venezuela-linked election infrastructure, these documents state. Now, keep in mind, we also have in our possession now not only Nicolas Maduro, but several other high-ranking officials who had previously defected from Venezuela and who have given this information to Tulsi Gabbard and the current administration. And all of that has been reviewed since President Trump came back into office. Now, just a few months before the 2020 election, there was a U.S. intelligence warning of the foreign adversaries having the capability to compromise America's voting infrastructure, and they raised specific concerns about that vulnerability inside these voter registration databases that later would be penetrated by China and Iran. The National Intelligence Council's concerns were so extensive that officials personally briefed Trump at the White House in February of 2020. And that's according to photos that were obtained by Just the News. It shows that the CIA, the FBI, and Homeland Security officials joined the National Intelligence Council analysts to go into the White House and personally brief President Trump because nobody was saying anything. But the American public was never told, even after this evidence emerged that China had gained access to voter registration databases in multiple states. We judge that U.S. adversaries, including at a minimum Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, as well as non-state groups, have the capability to compromise U.S. election infrastructure for the 2020 election. This National Intelligence Council memo was dated January 15th of 2020. And of course, what happened right around that time? They started the pandemic and everything went to shit and everybody's attention was focused on that. Now, Tulsi Gabbard declassified this information last month, but nobody else had seen it up until that point. Now, the document never mentioned Venezuela, but these new memos make clear there were definitely concerns about Venezuela that emerged in 2020 and have not been made public. Of course, we were talking about Venezuela way back then. Obviously, Smartmatic having been a Venezuelan company now directly embedded inside U.S. election infrastructure, that was a clear opportunity for an insertion into the U.S. election system. We were called crazy conspiracy theorists back then, but now they are proving it that we were absolutely correct. An intelligence community inspector general found in early January of 2021 a report that U.S. intelligence analysts appeared to hold back that information on Chinese meddling because they simply didn't like President Trump's policies. The Iranian regime's efforts to harm Trump's 2020 candidacy were also downplayed by Democratic opponents of President Trump as he was squaring off against Joe Biden. And it was revealed last year that a confidential human source told FBI counterintelligence in the summer of 2020 that the Chinese Communist Party government was seeking to meddle in the impending election in an effort to help Joe Biden. We also know about Joe Biden's long history getting bought off by Chinese sources and positions of power and money. Officials say an ongoing second Trump administration investigation has yet to find evidence that vote counting machines themselves were directly compromised in the 2020 election. But the memo also shows how such machines could be vulnerable to intrusions in the future and made clear that voter registration databases were breached by China and Iran at a time in the past and were also easy targets. So the ODNI released that March 2021 assessment showing which agencies unanimously agreed that Russia had sought to hurt Biden, while Iran worked to harm President Trump. But the agencies never reached unanimity on China. And the reason they never reached that unanimity is because much of this intelligence was held back intentionally. John Ratcliffe, if you'll remember, during President Trump's first term, had attempted to raise the alarm on China's influence in the U.S. election system. He, as well, was hampered. The intelligence report that he put out, Chinese government production and export of fraudulent U.S. driver's licenses to Chinese sympathizers in the United States in order to create tens of thousands of fraudulent mail-in ballots for U.S. presidential candidate Joe Biden in late 2020, was eventually released. And now we have that as part of the official record. So we will continue to watch as Tulsi Gabbard keeps bringing new information declassified both to President Trump and Congress. But I take you back once again to the idea that what Tulsi Gabbard is doing is not disconnected from the larger grand conspiracy to destroy President Trump. Each and every one of these actions was another furtherance of that conspiracy. Now we have this quote from Paul Sperry, who says that FBI Director Kash Patel says there is enough evidence for the DOJ to bring a strong case against top Russiagate conspirators, including James Comey and John Brennan, and the process of finding and presenting supporting documents and swearing in cooperating witnesses before federal grand juries is well underway. Remember, we had the report when Joe DeGenova came on that there were cooperating witnesses who were at that time being sworn in before the grand jury in Fort Pierce, Florida, operating to do exactly what Kash Patel says we have the ability to do right there. Now, all roads lead to Obama, and Barack Obama is rearing his ugly head because he's very concerned about the direction all of these investigations are going. He gave an interview to, I believe, Stephen Colbert, where he says that, the Justice Department is being politicized and that this is not something the president should be doing. So he did a pre-recorded appearance on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, which is about to go off the air. And he said, we can't overcome the politicization of our justice system, the awesome power of the state. The White House shouldn't be able to direct the Attorney General to go around prosecuting whoever the president wants prosecuted. The AG is the people's lawyer, not the president's consigliere. You can't have a situation in which whoever is in charge of the government starts using that to go after their political enemies or reward their friends. That is effing rich, coming from Barack Hussein Obama and the Democrats in general. Highly ironic, given the fact that Obama and Biden's DOJ have an extensive record of targeting conservatives and political opponents. And, of course, we saw all of that play out, not only during Joe Biden's 4 years in office, but Barack Obama did the exact same thing, even to a much greater degree, during his time in office. Now, we don't need to watch the clip, but what would be interesting is to watch this clip of Todd Blanche responding to CBS News, asking him about Barack Obama's comments. And perhaps this will give Barack Hussein Obama a different perspective. Take a listen.
In a recent interview, former President Barack Obama said, and I quote, "The White House shouldn't be able to direct the Attorney General to go around prosecuting whoever the president wants to prosecute." You're the Attorney General. What is your response?
Well, coincidentally, I happen to have, I think, a copy of our Constitution. So if we want, we can read our Constitution together. Article 2 says the executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America. It does not say that the Attorney General stands off to the side. So I'm an acting Attorney General. The Attorney General is a member of the cabinet of the President of the United States. The Constitution gives the President power. So I question people in this country that suggest that President Trump, as the chief executive of the United States, does not have the authority or the right or shouldn't be leading this country in all areas, including what we need to be doing to get rid of crime in this country. And so I'm not familiar with the comments you just talked about, but to the extent that President Trump calls me and says that he thinks that we have a problem in this country, whether it's this scourge of drugs, illegal immigration, every American wants him to do that, and he should.
But the accusation here from the former president is that your department is now charging political adversaries of the president or perceived political adversaries of the president on his behalf to settle scores, essentially.
There's something extraordinarily rich about a Democrat suggesting that this administration is charging our political adversaries. I mean, first of all, we're not. Second of all, how about we think about what happened the past 4 years? It wasn't just President Trump that got indicted repeatedly in multiple district courts, in multiple jurisdictions, but it was also his entire administration, what was called into the grand jury. Members of his Secret Service detail had to testify in the grand jury. So I welcome criticism. Let's go. But let's, if you're sitting in a glass house, you ought not throw stones.
Yeah, that's for Barack Hussein Obama. I love it. You know, this guy doesn't know the Constitution, but you'd be damned if Todd Blanche isn't going to know the Constitution. The Attorney General serves at the pleasure of the president. And if the president says a crime is being committed, we really ought to make sure that we go after it. Well, that's just the way that it goes. Now, this is a different presentation of another portion of that interview. In that interview, Todd Blanche also revealed that the United States is now actively pursuing denaturalization cases of people who were naturalized, became citizens, and either lied during the course of that process to become citizens or committed crimes against the United States of America, and so are therefore having their citizenship stripped. We have more cases of denaturalization right now than we've had in the last 9 years combined. Let's take a listen.
Historically, the denaturalization process, the act of revoking someone's citizenship, someone who was born overseas but who became an American citizen legally, has been rare and limited, Vlad, to egregious cases involving human rights abusers or terrorists or national security threats. But now the second Trump administration is trying to dramatically expand that procedure, expanding the categories of legal immigrants who are naturalized U.S. citizens who could be subject to denaturalization. Let's take a listen to what the acting Attorney General, Todd Blanche, told us about that campaign. There's a lot of concern among naturalized citizens, and I think there's about 24 million citizens who are naturalized here in the U.S.
Well, I don't know why they would be concerned. So, for example, it's like saying, are you going to arrest just people who rob a convenience store? Because there's a lot of people who go to convenience stores who are worried. They shouldn't be. If you didn't commit a crime in the way you committed, in the way you became a citizen, I don't think you have anything to worry about. So I don't think it's true that those 24 million citizens are worried. I think there's a very small percentage of them who are worried. And yes, they should be.
And yes, they should be.
And Vlad, Blanche conceded to us that revoking someone's citizenship is a drastic consequence and action, but he said that committing fraud to obtain that citizenship in the first place is also a drastic act by the person who is being targeted as part of this denaturalization campaign. But of course, there are a lot of concerns among naturalized citizens that they could be targeted by this campaign. There are 24 million naturalized citizens here in the U.S.
And Camilla,
why would any of those naturalized citizens be worried? It makes me think that many of those 24 million are aware of the fraud they committed to receive their citizenship. That's the only reason anybody should be worried. Did you lie on your application? Was there fraud that was committed to get you that status that you so dramatically wanted? Or are you just an average Joe? Are you living your life? You working? You following the laws? If you are, you've got nothing to worry about.
So, there have been claims that the DOJ is conducting a retribution campaign. What did Blanche say to that?
Well, as you know, former President Barack Obama recently said that the Justice Department can't be directed by the president to go around prosecuting and targeting his political rivals. We posed that question directly to Blanche. Let's take a listen to how he responded to that criticism.
It is absolutely not true. And how do I prove it's not true? Well, if you look at the recent indictment you asked me about a few minutes ago, you have local prosecutors, you have local agents that I don't even know their names. Okay, I don't know their names who are bringing these charges. Okay, that's one way. And the next thing I'll say is it is extraordinarily hypocritical and extraordinarily rich for these critics, as you call them, to focus on what this administration is doing when almost to a person they remained dead silent for 4 years while we saw what happened during the Biden administration with President Trump.
Clearly, the Biden administration was doing exactly what these so-called critics are claiming the Trump administration is doing. And that's why they're so nervous, because they are worried that their crimes will be exposed and they will be held to account. Now, before we continue, you guys, I have a very quick message here. If you guys are listening to this program, I want you to think about this, and I want you to really ponder it. How much control do you actually have over your money right now? Because technology has changed everything, and now it's significantly changing how money works. Crypto started out as a sort of niche, but now it's really gone mainstream. You get faster payments, more control, fewer middlemen. It's not hype. It's really just the way things are going. And getting started today is a lot easier than you might think. This is where the Rumble Wallet comes in, because with Rumble Wallet, you can buy Bitcoin, you can hold dollar-backed stablecoins, you can even own digital gold that's backed by real gold all in one place. It is extremely simple. It all connects through MoonPay, so you can use your debit card, your credit card, or you can link your bank account. You'll be up and running in minutes. You can start small, $10, $50, $100. It's not really about the amount. It's basically about getting in early and understanding what's coming next. And then once you're set up, even more importantly, like Siesta Randy, you can use that Rumble Wallet to tip your favorite Rumble creators, either me or somebody else. So do this right now. You can scan that QR code, or you can click the link in the description to download the Rumble Wallet. From there, you just set up your wallet, you connect your Rumble account, you can tap buy, and you're in the game. And by doing so, you can take control of your own money by getting started with the Rumble Wallet today. Thank you very much to Rumble. All right. Also, thank you to Principled Enigma, who says, any bets out there as to whether or not Trump will run for a third term and win? Well, I think that there is always the possibility, but there would obviously have to be some things that would have happened behind the scenes to change it to make that possible. Thank you so much also to thank you to Sean Joe for the cookie. Thank you to 123SKG for the cookie. Thank you to Intolerant Leftists. Okay. Additional H-1B capped exempt organizations include nonprofit research, government research, nonprofit university affiliated entities. Previously cap exempt worker maintains for life as long as they don't lose the U.S. long enough to lose it. Sean Joe, thank you for the can, the cookie, the cookie, the cookie, the cookie, and the cookie. Appreciate that. All right. Now, also thinking about some changes taking place in the federal government, Secretary Brooke Rollins has announced another major crackdown on SNAP retailers who are facilitating fraud using food stamps. Now, this is obviously on top of their efforts to arrest the fraudsters, but also they are closing loopholes which people were previously using to gain as much money out of the food stamp process as possible. Let's take a listen.
So much more to come. And I will say today we're making yet another announcement here on your show. The rule is official today that we are doubling the stocking standards. So we're going to keep holding the retailers accountable as well. What we've talked about so far, Maria, on your show is the people who are receiving the benefits that shouldn't be. But there's also a lot of retailer fraud, the stores that take the EBT cards, the SNAP cards, and we're cracking down on that with a big announcement today for our retailers.
Yeah, tell us more about that, because with this new rule that you're talking about this morning, we want to understand how this plays out in terms of who gets impacted. You're talking about stocking standards for stores who participate in the SNAP program. You want them, you'll require them now to carry more nutritious and whole foods?
That's correct. So under the old rule, until today, basically, under the old rule, anyone accepting the 240,000 retailers in America who accept the food stamp, they had to stock, the stocking standards, they had to stock 12 or more, quote, nutritious food, real food. Well, today we're more than doubling that to 28, but we're also closing the loophole. So, Maria, before today, you could stock jelly as a fruit and jerky as a real protein. All that changes today, 12 to 28 at a minimum for any of the gas stations and the corner stores. And what I will say is there are a lot of communities that don't have access to a H-E-B in Texas or a Whole Foods or a Fairway. I was in Iowa visiting the Fairway stores 2 days ago. A lot of Americans don't have access to those. So for those that do get a lot of their groceries from a corner store, from a bodega, we're going to make sure that there's a lot more nutritious foods on the shelves and that they're actually real nutritious food. So it's an important day. We're cracking down on the fraud, but we're also opening up the market to better foods for Americans who rely on those stores for where they receive their groceries.
Well, that's
undeniably a win. Real food, not junk food. Also, we have new information that you might be getting scammed, and I hope that Brooke Rollins and the USDA pay attention to this as well. You know, it wasn't that long ago, Lisa said to me something about food that we were purchasing, like we purchased meat, and she said she had heard that the meat packers were weighing, like packaging, not just the raw gross weight of the food. But it's even worse than that. It appears that at many Walmarts and grocery stores around the country, Americans are being defrauded. Not only are the weights lower than what are listed on the package, and we're being essentially priced out because of the unfair competition that we're seeing in the meat packing industry. The weights are significantly less than what they are listed as. Take a listen to this. It means that people like us are just getting robbed blind by meat and fish and food packers. Not just meats, but just like dry goods on the shelf.
It's real money for us, but it's big money for them.
It is. It's big money in profits.
Jimmy agreed to show me how it's done.
You want to try it?
I'll throw it on there.
Yeah, go ahead.
But each Domino powdered sugar bag we pulled off the shelf at this store was about an ounce under.
It's happening everywhere. I'm just one guy.
This brisket's supposed to be 4.6 pounds. So I set off to test myself. Oh, Kentucky legend. Walmart's, Kroger's, and Publix across Cobb and DeKalb counties. We stopped in Dollar General and Piggly Wiggly, too. We followed Jimmy's method. $40. Whew. Pulling products off the shelves for a quick spot test with our scale. Look at these frozen shrimp from Walmart, a 2-pound bag. Jimmy, in repeated tests, found them underweight. So we grabbed bags from 2 different Walmart locations. The FDA says the weight is calculated deglazed. That means without all that ice. But both bags we tested were not what they claimed on the package. Our scale showed both a 1/4 pound under the weight printed on the bag. What about some shrimp and grits? It's about an ounce under. It's an ounce under. These grits were on sale at a DeKalb Piggly Wiggly, but each bag we pulled off the shelf was underweight. So how and why is it happening?
It's lack of vigilance.
Emory Goizetta Business School professor Salani Farasta Fazzoni is an expert on pricing.
So both from an ethical standpoint as well as from a legal standpoint, they're misrepresenting what they're selling.
She says research has shown shoppers won't notice differences under 15% in price or size. After Jimmy's TikToks went viral, Kentucky legend Ham pulled some hams from Walmart. Jimmy started this because money was tight. Now he's hoping to push big companies to do better.
So they should be responsible for what they're selling in their stores.
Domino told us their industrial scales are calibrated on an ongoing basis and they run spot checks on their lines daily. We also asked Walmart about those shrimp. A spokesperson told me they did audits on several lots and did not find any problems. It's real money for us, but it's...
Of course, I saw a question in the chat. Is the scale properly calibrated? Well, it looks like they were using multiple scales, and they were finding problems across multiple types of items. I have my own kitchen scale that I use here, and so I'm going to be going out next time I go grocery shopping this weekend, and we're going to be testing it. We're going to find out. I will let you guys know what I find, but I would also encourage each and every one of you to do the same thing. All right, now, News coming out of Fulton County. Yesterday, we talked about the grand jury. Also, the ongoing court case. Fulton County was attempting to claw back the election materials from the federal government. Well, in the last 24 hours, the government and the people just won a major victory in terms of that election integrity fight. U.S. District Judge J.P. Boulay has denied Fulton County's motion to force the return of those 600 boxes of 2020 election records from the FBI that were seized in January. So the district court held that the county has failed to meet the extremely high standard under federal rules of criminal procedure 41G, which allows a court to exercise equitable jurisdiction in regard to this ongoing criminal investigation. So Fulton County was arguing that the actions taken by the FBI equated to an unlawful search and seizure, and the petitioner's constitutional rights were violated. Well, as you know, the Fulton County Board of Elections doesn't have constitutional rights. People have constitutional rights. The DOJ argued governments are not afforded the same constitutional rights as citizens. The court found that the petitioners have not shown the respondents' alleged interference with principles of state sovereignty demonstrates a callous disregard for their constitutional rights. So the judge did note that portions of the 18-page affidavit were perhaps problematic and in some instances misleading, but he ultimately concluded the warrant included both inculpatory and exculpatory information, stating the affidavit stated that Special Agent Evans presented the magistrate judge with facts that both hurt and helped him. This is not a situation where an officer left out all of the facts that might undermine probable cause or where an officer intentionally lied. This court acknowledges the events leading up to this case are, in a variety of ways, unprecedented, but the Ritchie test has been in place for nearly 50 years, and its limits apply no matter who the government is investigating, Boulay wrote. To apply the law differently here because of what this case is about or whose records are at issue would defy our nation's foundational principle that our law applies to all without regard to numbers, wealth, or rank. Each of the factors, including the first and most important factor, callous disregard, weighs against this court's exercise of jurisdictions. So we just won in Fulton County. That means that the investigation continues. That means now the FBI has full license to start going through all of those boxes. And considering that the grand jury has been operating in the background this entire time, highly notable. Now, take a listen to this. The people working on this case are some big names and very notable. Now that Fulton County has lost their motion to return those 600 boxes, that means the current leadership at the DOJ is now in a position to begin going through everything. Now, in case you didn't know, Stanley Woodward is currently in the number 3 position at the DOJ. He's the Associate Attorney General. Thomas Albus, under Attorney General Pam Bondi, was given nationwide authority to look into election fraud claims, specifically about the 2020 election. R. Trent McCotter is the principal assistant, the first among equals of the multiple assistant deputies that report directly to Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, now Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche. That position is the functional chief of staff operating for Attorney General Blanche. Michael Weisbuch is a specially appointed senior counsel to Stanley Woodward, and the best description that Shipwreck can offer is that those positions are focused on one particular matter. That matter in this instance would be election fraud. Now, this fight with Fulton County over the search warrant is a criminal matter that would typically involve someone like Albus and whatever staff of the AUSAs he has working on this project that Pam Bondi tasked him with. We now know they have a grand jury subpoena that's out there seeking identifications of persons who were involved in the vote counting. That means they are lining up witnesses to testify. Do you guys know why they would be lining up witnesses to testify? Why they are trying to identify all of the people who were counting those ballots? Well, it's because they know exactly how many ballots were counted without signature verification. That's a felony. They know exactly how many ballots were double counted, over almost 4,000. That's also a felony. They also know how many ballots were intentionally inserted into the system, yet another felony. Each and every one of these people that are being questioned in this grand jury right now are people who are placed in criminal jeopardy. And do they want to put themselves in prison for the rest of their lives, or do they want to become cooperating witnesses? I posit to you that, yeah, they are going to do whatever they can to save their own skin. I wonder if Ruby Freeman is going to be called before this grand jury. All right, now we're also going to check in with Michigan because a new 2020 election document has revealed that 12.5% of absentee ballots are missing the official envelope. I ask you, and I've asked before, how could an absentee ballot, which by its very nature is delivered in an envelope, be present without the envelope? That seems to indicate that that's an inserted absentee ballot. Now, this is a violation of the law, and Yehuda Miller, the young man from New Jersey who's been working on the case of the 2020 election since it happened, is the man who discovered this. Now, this is a very long-standing investigation. Yehuda Miller and his team of election experts are currently reviewing nearly 1 million documents, all from Detroit and Wayne County's November 2020 election. Let me also remind you that Harmeet Dillon at the Department of Justice just recently took action against Wayne County. I would imagine that the information Yehuda Miller and his team are gleaning is heading straight into Harmeet Dillon's hands. These are the same records that a judge forced the city of Detroit to turn over because of Yehuda Miller's FOIA requests. Many of these documents arrived out of order. The team working on them built a custom website to organize and display them. And one of the volunteers, Fani Mantravati, put it together. And now they have successfully digitized and sequenced over 155,000 absentee ballot envelopes by Counting Board, allowing the volunteers to meticulously examine every single one for irregularities and fraud. These volunteers are putting in 12-hour days. They are working for free. They are entering critical data, flagging every questionable, fraudulent, or illegally accepted ballot envelope that Detroit officials just rubber stamped in 2020. Before they end up releasing these filings to the public, they are checking, double checking, and even sometimes triple checking in order to ensure their accuracy. And they are now in the process of putting all of this information out there so that you and others can go ahead and review it and see exactly how foobarred the 2020 election was in Detroit. So these are their findings so far. 12.5% of all absentee votes in taxpayer-subsidized housing, which is the Section 8 housing, do not have an accompanying envelope. That is a requirement of Michigan law. As part of that research into why we have such a disparity in the number of absentee ballots as compared to absentee ballot envelopes, we decided to run a sample of absentee-only voters living at addresses of 51 taxpayer-subsidized housing units in Detroit to see what they would find. Once we identified the absentee voters who allegedly voted absentee from those addresses, we matched their name and address to the absentee envelopes we have obtained through the FOIA lawsuit. When that research was complete, we were stunned to discover a whopping 12.4% of the alleged absentee voters who voted did not have any record of an accompanying envelope. That, again, is required by law when voting absentee in Michigan, and if it doesn't have an envelope, that vote cannot be counted. So the question then is, what happened to all of the missing absentee envelopes? Who counted all of those ballots? And who knew at the time that those legally required ballots were either not sealed in an envelope or the envelopes were destroyed? Because the Michigan law is pretty clear. The official return envelope with the voter's signature is required as a security requirement. That's how they verified the ballot came in the proper way. Clerks are legally obligated to enforce this law, and when they knowingly bypass it, it's a felony. Under MCL 168.764A, every absentee ballot must be returned in the official state-issued return envelope because it has that signature. The voter is required to place that marked ballot inside the secrecy sleeve, then place that sleeve inside the official return envelope. They are then required to sign and date the certificate on the back. A ballot without the proper official return envelope or without a valid voter signature on the envelope does not meet the legal requirements and is not eligible to be counted. Clerks do not have discretion to ignore the envelope requirement process or ballots they receive without one. When they knowingly process absentee ballots with no return envelope in the proper form, then it is a violation of Michigan law. It's treated as election fraud under MCL 168.932. It's a felony punishable by up to 5 years in prison and a substantial fine. And when done on a large scale, such as what we see here in Wayne County, Detroit, it can also trigger additional charges for official misconduct or conspiracy. So now that we have this evidence obtained by FOIA from the city of Detroit showing that absentee ballots were counted without envelopes, the only question that I think anybody cares about is, will anyone be held accountable? Detroit City Clerk Janice Winfrey is who would have been in charge of this. Did she know the absentee ballots were being counted without ballot envelopes? In 2020, Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson was admonished by a judge for mailing 7.7 million unsolicited voter applications to every eligible voter in the state without proper approval. She also directed local clerks to ignore signature verification requirements during the largest mail-in election in Michigan history, where proper signatures and strict chain of custody rules, including the mandatory use of official absentee ballot envelopes, were essential to ensuring a free and fair election. We will soon release the full astounding discrepancy between the number of absentee ballots received versus the number of official absentee ballot envelopes submitted by the city of Detroit. But for now, all they can say is they have a high degree of confidence that in this small sample of taxpayer-subsidized housing facilities, 12.4% of absentee ballots were counted without an official envelope as required by Michigan law. There is going to be much, much more to come from this investigation. And as they release the details here, again, I am certain they are passing this on to Harmeed Dillon and the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice. But here we have a couple of examples showing the correct way that these are supposed to be submitted. We also have problems with the UOCAVA ballots and so on and so forth. The Michigan election, at very least in Wayne County, is crooked. It was not done properly. And in order to prove the stolen election of 2020, Michigan is going to be a huge, huge part of it. Lee Walden says, let me reiterate. Oh, first, lest we forget Miss Tina Peters. Bless you, Miss Tina. Let me reiterate. Release Tina now. No more excuses. Unfortunately, we are still waiting on the court system in Colorado, and the governor, Jared Polis, has not released any information about the commutation of her sentence. This would be the perfect opportunity for the government to step in, although they have already attempted to have Tina Peters released into federal custody, and the government of Colorado has refused to do so. All right, now, we've also learned of a brand new federal investigation looking into $2.6 billion in suspicious oil trades that are tied to announcements around the Iran war. Federal investigators are probing at least 4 suspiciously timed oil trades that were worth more than $2.6 billion. They were placed minutes before major announcements about the Iran war, which sent crude prices tumbling. So the Department of Justice and the Commodity Futures Trading Commission are investigating whether traders improperly obtained advanced information tied to military and diplomatic developments involving the U.S., Iran, and the Strait of Hormuz. These suspicious trades allegedly involved huge wagers that oil prices would fall shortly before President Trump and senior Iranian officials made market-moving announcements during the conflict. This data was obtained by ABC News from the London Stock Exchange, showing that on March 23rd, traders placed more than $500 million in bets that oil prices would decline just 15 minutes before President Trump announced he would delay threatened attacks on Iran's power grid. Oil prices dropped sharply after that announcement. On April 7th, traders waged about $960 million against oil prices a few hours before President Trump revealed the ceasefire. Another suspiciously timed trade came on April 17th when traders placed $760 million in bearish oil bets about 20 minutes before the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi posted on social media that the Strait of Hormuz was open to commercial shipping. And obviously, whoever is doing this is making a ton of money. On April 21st, traders were found placing another $430 million worth of bets on falling oil prices about 15 minutes before President Trump announced the extension on the ceasefire. The trading data itself does not identify the individuals or the firms behind these positions, and it does not necessarily prove insider trading or criminal conduct. But the size of the bets, the timing of the bets, is fueling concern that there is somebody who is leaking information, and the federal authorities have taken serious note of it. They have separately examined unusual activities in prediction markets. We've talked about a number of those cases. Last month, there was an Army soldier who was charged for trading on information related to the capture of Nicolas Maduro. I personally don't have any problem with that. Let the guy make the money. That's no big deal. Freya and the boys says Corn Pop was a bad dude. $5 challenge out to the best chat in the business. Good show, Zach. Thank you so very much. I mean it. Thank you. I love you, brother. I love you too, homie. Thank you for that. All right. Now, we also have another case of fraud that I want to make sure we talk about before we close out for the day. A man in Detroit is accused of leading a years-long student aid fraud scheme. He embezzled $16 million, and he's now pled guilty to wire fraud and aggravated identity theft, the U.S. Attorney's Office in Michigan said. Federal prosecutors say that between January 2015 and February 2024, 42-year-old Brandon Robinson submitted student aid claims for 1,200 people at more than 100 schools in 24 states, and officials say the scheme involved a group called the Straw Students who were enrolled for the sole purpose of receiving aid. This sounds like the follow-up to what Linda McMahon said when she came into the Department of Education and said that they found all of these fake students that were receiving financial aid all around the country. This is likely the outcome of that investigation. Officials say more than $10 million of the money was distributed. Robinson filed over 100 unemployment insurance claims between April of 2020 and March of 2023, receiving $1 million in unemployment benefits. Scams like this steal money from hardworking taxpayers and legitimate students, and that is unacceptable, said John Woolley, special agent in charge of the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Inspector General Regional Office. The OIG and our law enforcement partners are committed to fighting student aid fraud, and we will continue to aggressively pursue those that participate in these types of crimes. Robinson will be sentenced on September 1st of this year. He faces up to 20 years in prison. All right. Now, thank you to Sean Joe for the cookie. Thank you to Filter Dog, who says Simpson knew. Who is Simpson? Let's pull that up. The Simpsons warned us about the midterm virus. Coronavirus cruises. So this is just a meme that somebody made. I don't know. Maybe this was, I don't know if this is created by AI or whatever. Darla says, thank you, Zach. Always on point. And thank you, Lisa. What a team. Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Darla. Thank you to everybody for hanging out with us today. Trisha says, Comey, eat this. Let's see what this is. $69.42. That's funny. Now, I will show you guys something that definitely raised my interest in relation to hantavirus. We've seen this sort of thing before. This has happened previously. There's no real way to know whether or not this person had inside info or if they just posted a bunch of random stuff and then deleted the stuff that didn't hit. But this account, Soothsayer, who had like no followers a couple of days ago, and June 11th, 2022 at 1:30 a.m., 2023 coronavirus ended, 2026 hantavirus. And obviously this is in relation to the hantavirus outbreak, which allegedly has taken place on a cruise ship. The one thing that I'll say about that cruise ship is that every time somebody's on a cruise, and especially if they're stuck in port and they're not able to do anything, all of those people on those cruise ships are posting TikTok videos or social media reports, and they're talking about their experience. Nobody is doing that on this ship. There's only been like one or two people who have posted, and everybody else doesn't have phones. I don't buy it. I don't even necessarily believe that there really is a hantavirus outbreak. It's also reported that hantavirus has no known cures or treatments. But based upon the type of virus that it is, ivermectin should work just fine for it. So, I'm not worried about hantavirus at all. And this definitely right here did raise my interest. The fact that they posted 2026 hantavirus on June 11th of 2022. Certainly something to think about. All right. Before we go, I do have one final message from our friends over here on Rumble. Thank you very much to Rumble for supporting the program. You guys, if you still haven't tried 1775 coffee, I don't know what your problem is. You got to try 1775 coffee. It's really, really great. In their starter kits, you're going to get some of their bold dark roast, their smooth medium roast, and their vitality mushroom coffee. Innovative blend that's going to give you clean energy and laser focus without the crash. It's all from the highest quality beans you can get. They're single origin, small batch, toxin and mold free. Most coffees are not going to be able to say that. A lot of coffees just roast the beans way too long to kill any of that stuff that might be in there, and then it tastes all bitter and nasty. But in this coffee, you're also going to get some good freebies that includes their gold spoon clip, their strong frother, and their black 1775 tumbler. It's a great deal. It's $170 worth of coffee and gear, and it's all yours for just $99. This is for the people who have been watching 1775 blow up on Rumble and wonder if it's actually worth it. It truly is. And to find out for yourself, you got to go to 1775coffee.com/studio and grab one of their starter kits before they're gone. Get yourself some bold beans, clean fuel, and a morning routine that stands for something, just like Rumble does. And don't forget about all of the other sponsors of the program, including my friends over at Pet Club, redpillnews.petclub247.com, where you can get the best extraction of Coriolus versicolor. This is turkey tail mushroom in products for both people and pets. Supercharge your immune system, and it will definitely address many of the other things that people are concerned about. I'm actually going to have the founders of Pet Club on the program here, and they will tell you guys everything about their products and their company, and then you can decide for yourself. But the link is in the description below. Don't forget about my friends over at Tamarack Garden. 1 second.
Your body doesn't need more synthetic fixes. It needs real plant medicine. Wild herbs are packed with minerals, adaptogens, and healing compounds your body actually recognizes and can use, supporting energy, immunity, and balance from the inside out. At Tamarack Garden, our supplements bring these overlooked weeds and wildflowers back into your daily routine. Don't just manage symptoms, support your body and eat your weeds. Head to tamarackgarden.com for $10 off your order of $50 or more when you use code RP78 at checkout.
The thing about the supposed deaths on that cruise ship, those people haven't been identified. Nobody that's a family member has stepped forward to say, we know nothing about any of the people on that ship. That's one of the reasons that I don't believe necessarily that what they're telling us is actually happening. It could very easily be a psyop to create a new pandemic, some super strain of hantavirus that's going to kill everybody. Don't go out. You better not vote. You better stay home and trust that some global governance organization is going to come in and save you. Also, my good friends at onenessdrops.com/redpill78, where you can get chlorine dioxide water purification kits. When you use my code, you're going to get 15% off your entire order. Also, mypillow.com. Use code RP78 to save up to 80% off of Mike Lindell's amazing American-made products like MyPillow 2.0, the Giza Dream Sheets, the My Towels, the mattress pads, the mattress toppers, the mattresses. All of it is incredible stuff. And Jordan, my good friend Jordan Sather over at ConsciousStrength.net, use code RP78 to save 10% off of his American supplements as well, which is where I get my methylene blue from. And finally, my friends over at rncstore.com, when you use code RP78, you can save 10% off of their Laetrile B17 products. Laetrile B17, look into it. If you don't know, it is something that you're definitely going to want to add to your regimen, just like the Coriolus Versicolor. Lee Walden says, Jordan Sather, chlorine dioxide is a cure for hantavirus. Okay, well, chlorine dioxide is something that obviously I take all the time as well. So yeah, definitely. Darla, thank you very much. Gumada17, thank you for the cookie. All right, you guys, I'm going to send you home. Let me pass out these gold pills, and then I'm going to get some dinner with my wife. And she's probably going to be upset because I went over a little bit. But Tell Lisa thank you in the chat. Good luck. God bless. Meet me again here tomorrow at 5 p.m. for another episode of Red Pill News Live, and I will see you then. Don't forget to hit the like button.